Su Wanning was jolted awake by a shrill screech of scraping metal. No, that couldn't be right. She should already be dead. Her final memory replayed vividly, the zombie king's razor-sharp claws piercing straight through her chest. She had detonated her ability core then. Her Tier 10 psychic power and Tier 9 would type ability raged violently inside her body until everything erupted into a blinding white light that consumed her alongside mountains of undead and seas of blood. What happened after that? The next thing she knew, she was lying amid a rubbish heap. She opened her eyes to the rusted hull of an abandoned starship looming overhead. The air reeked of machine oil mixed with rot. A faded, threadbare blanket covered her body, and a hard metal slab dug into her back. "You're awake." A gentle male voice drifted over from beside her. Su Wanning shot upright in an instant, her Tier 10 psychic power unfurling instinctively. Her abilities were still intact, yet the signals she received felt utterly alien. There were no traces of zombies, no base defense barriers. Only. She froze. Her psychic senses swept a 500-meter radius, picking up just two living presences. Point one was the young man standing before her holding a bowl, with short brown hair, amber eyes, and patched yet spotlessly clean clothes. He smiled softly at her. The other figure lingered far off, emanating weak, wildly erratic psychic fluctuations. "You had a fever and slept straight through a full day and night." The young man held out the bowl to her. "Drink some nutrient paste. It's only the basic grade, but it's better than nothing." Su Wanning did not take it. A decade spent surviving the apocalypse had forged unshakable wariness in her. She scanned their surroundings rapidly. It was a shabby shelter cobbled together from scrap starship parts, roughly 20 square meters in size. All the furnishings were neatly arranged yet worn to tatters. Transparent panels sealed gaps in the walls, granting a clear view of the outside world. Desolation stretched endlessly. Mountains of waste filled every line of sight. Discarded starships, broken mechs, shattered storage containers layered atop one another. They formed rolling mounds that resembled the skeletons of colossal beasts beneath dim, murky light. Thick plumes of smoke rose on the horizon, and fine particulate matter hung suspended in the air. This was not the apocalypse she knew, not even close. There were no zombies, no mutated flora, and the sky bore no sickly blood-red hue. "Wanning." The young man stared at her with concern. "Are you all right? Is something still hurting you?" Wanning. That had been her name back in the apocalypse too, Su Wanning. "I'm fine," she rasped, her voice hoarse and unrecognizable. It did not belong to her. It sounded far younger, laced with the clear sweetness of a teenage girl. She glanced down at her hands, pale, slender, nothing like the rough, calloused palms honed by 10 years of brutal survival. Lin visibly sagged in relief and smiled warmly. "Thank goodness. Your fever spiked terribly. I was terrified something would go wrong. Have a sip first, then rest properly." He offered the bowl once more. This time, Su Wanning took it. The bowl held pale green liquid, thick as rice water, utterly odorless. Having endured all manner of revolting sustenance during the end times, she considered this far from the worst. She tilted her head back and drained it in one gulp. The taste, bland, faintly astringent, with a lingering chemical aftertaste coating her tongue. Was this what food tasted like in the interstellar era? Her taste buds screamed in protest. Speaking of which, Linny tidied the crude tableware as if a thought had just struck him, his tone casual. "Your 18th birthday was yesterday. The Psychic Regulation Bureau must have sent notice about your matching assignment. This morning, envoys from the Yi household came and said." He paused, weighing his words carefully. A flood of foreign memories crashed into Su Wanning's mind all at once. The original owner's life surged forth like a tide. She hailed from the noble Marquis Su household, yet psychic testing had labeled her null psychic, a disgrace to her clan. Abandoned on the junk star merely 3 days after birth, she had scraped by scavenging trash for 18 years. Yesterday marked her 18th birthday, the day scheduled for her official psychic pairing. As for the Yi household, their disgraced eldest heir, Yi Wuhan, rumored to have been poisoned and reduced to a useless invalid. "The Yi family paired Yi Wuhan off to me." Su Wanning finished his sentence for him. Linny blinked, then let out a bitter laugh. "You already know." "I guess." Su Wanning tossed the blanket aside and stood. Her frame felt light, weakened by years of malnutrition, though her bone structure was well proportioned beneath the frailty. She walked to the transparent wall panel and gazed out. Did the Yi envoys come themselves? They did, dumped him here, and left without a single word of explanation. A rare flicker of irritation edged Lin Yi's voice. He's a living person, not cargo. They just abandoned him like trash. Su Wanning said nothing. From the original owner's fragmented recollections, Yi Wuhin had once been the Empire's prodigy. At 18, he had awakened an SS-grade physical ability, shaking the entire nobility and hailed as the Yi clan's future hope. Yet 1 year later, he had supposedly suffered a catastrophic ability backlash, his power plummeting to a pitiful C rank, rendering him worthless ever after. Public gossip claimed reckless cultivation had shattered his core. But snippets of information the original owner had stumbled across on the junk star told a different secret. Yi Wuhin's mother had been murdered, and he himself had been slowly poisoned. It seemed the rumors held the truth. His stepmother had poisoned him to clear the path for her own son to inherit the Marquis title. Marrying the disgraced heir off to a null psychic outcast on the junk star served two perfect purposes. She could cast him out of the household lawfully while feigning boundless generosity. A flawless scheme. Cunning beyond measure. Do you want to see him? Lin Yi stepped to her side. They left him in the derelict warehouse to the east. The Yi men said he's in a terrible state. A terrible state. Su Wanning already knew that full well. Her psychic power had sensed him 500 meters away. Those turbulent, roiling fluctuations, like a tiny boat caught in a raging storm, on the verge of capsizing at any moment. This was no mere poor condition, it was full-blown psychic mania triggered by slow poison. Without stabilization, he would not survive another year. I'll go, Su Wanning declared. She pushed open the flimsy shelter door. Frigid junk star wind whipped tiny metal shards into her face. She narrowed her eyes, stepped onto the soft mound of scrap waste, and headed east. Lin Yi followed silently behind her. They walked single file for roughly 10 minutes, rounding the wreckage of a decommissioned starship, until the lone abandoned warehouse to the east came into view. Its metal doors hung wide open, revealing a solitary figure within. He was not standing, he sat slumped against the wall on the cold ground. Su Wanning drew closer. A young man clad in formal Yi household robes, fine fabric crumpled beyond recognition. Silvery long hair spilled over his shoulders, his face buried in his knees, his whole body curled into a tight ball like a wounded, discarded cub. He lifted his head at the sound of footsteps. Su Wanning's breath caught in her throat. His features were devastatingly exquisite, sharp, profound bone structure, skin pale enough to look translucent, rare violet eyes peeking out from strands of silver hair. But those eyes were bloodshot, heavy with unending despair and self-loathing, two stars flickering on the brink of extinction. He fixed his empty gaze on Su Wanning, voice gritty as sand. Who are you? Your legal spouse, Su Wanning. Su Wanning? The Su girl dumped on the junk star the day she was born. That's me. What of it? Think I'm beneath you? I'm a dying man. Won't this marriage make you miserable? I'm labeled a worthless outcast by everyone too. We're a perfect match. Besides, your poison means nothing to me. Miss Su, do not speak such empty boasts. Every top specialist on the core worlds has failed to cure my toxin, and you, a null psychic nobody, a sneer twisted Yi Wuhin's features. Su Wanning's expression remained calm. We'll find out if I can help once we try. You're mine now, and I won't let you wallow in this pitiful state. You're insane, Yi Wuhin's voice cracked faintly. What exactly are you after? He whispered, almost to himself. Su Wanning thought for a moment and answered earnestly, your face. You're pleasant to look at. Yi Wuhin stared blankly. Pardon? There are barely any people on this junk star, let alone anyone as handsome as you, Su Wanning elaborated. Lin Yi let out a soft laugh beside them. Wanning, I never took you for someone who judges people by their looks. Would I have stuck by you all this time if you weren't easy on the eyes? Su Wanning said without the slightest change in expression. Yi Wuhin studied the strange girl before him. Though she claimed she only wanted him for his appearance, her eyes held pure, untainted clarity, stealing his breath away. The words slipped out unbidden. If you can purge this poison from my body, everything I own is yours, including myself. Far above, gliding slowly across the junk star's murky sky, a military starship cruised onward. Inside the vessel's command bridge, a man dressed in crisp black military uniform stood before the panoramic viewport, his heavy gaze fixed on the waste-covered planet far below. General, the source of the anomalous psychic fluctuations has been locked onto this junk star, the adjutant reported. Its intensity is unprecedented. No matching records exist in the database. The man did not turn around. He had raven hair and dark eyes, sharp, chiseled features scarred by an old wound slicing the end of his left eyebrow. His aura of unyielding menace. His uniform was immaculately pressed, 3-star insignias glinting coldly on his epaulets under the cabin lights. This was Gu Yuan, commander of the 7th Central Imperial Legion, an SSS-grade ability wielder, the strongest man in the entire empire. Yet at this very moment, his own psychic power raged on the verge of catastrophic breakdown, searing agony splitting his skull apart. "Descend," he ordered flatly. The adjutant hesitated. "General, this is an unregulated junk star. There are no official docking platforms." "I said descend." Yi Wuhan suspected he had lost his mind entirely. He sat inside a ramshackle hut barely capable of shielding its occupants from wind and rain. Before him stood a crude stove fashioned from discarded energy cores. A pot bubbling away atop it, releasing an aroma that made his stomach churn violently with craving. What scent was this? At 24 years old, he had sampled every grade of nutrient paste imaginable: basic, flavored, performance-enhancing, exclusive noble blends. Yet never once breathed in such a rich, mellow fragrance, one that sent shivers rippling through his entire frame. "Patience, it'll be ready soon," Su Wanning squatted beside the stove, stirring the soup with a hand-carved wooden spoon. "Where did you get fresh vegetables?" he could not help but ask. "Scavenged," Su Wanning replied without glancing back. "Scavenged? This is the junk star. You can find anything here." She turned to face him. "Cargo freighters crash sometimes, spilling their goods. If you're lucky, you'll unearth rare supplies." Yi Wuhan wanted to call her bluff, yet the words died on his tongue. It hardly mattered. He was a discarded invalid now. He had no right to question where her provisions came from. What he did not know was that all those supposed crash cargoes originated from Su Wanning's spatial ring. She had only crossed into this world half a day prior and had not yet had time to cultivate crops. The vegetables and canned meat within the ring were stockpiled relics from her apocalypse days. Her reserves were limited, yet more than enough to sustain them for a good while. "It's done." Su Wanning stood and ladled 3 bowls of soup. The ceramic bowls were cracked, one even missing a chunk from its rim, yet scrubbed spotlessly clean. The broth glowed golden, dotted with tender green vegetable fragments and chunks of slow braised meat falling apart at the touch. Lin handed one bowl to Yi Wuhan gently. "Careful, it's hot." Yi Wuhan's hands trembled as he stared down at the soup. That aroma, rich, savory. Warm liquid sliding down his throat into his stomach, a soothing warmth spreading outward to every limb and vein. The unending mania plaguing his psychic power quieted, if only for a fleeting instant, after just a single sip. Merely one mouthful of soup. His hands shook harder still. "Is it not to your taste?" Su Wanning frowned, noticing his odd reaction. "It's delicious," Yi Wuhan mumbled, bringing the bowl closer to his face, nearly burying his features in it as he drank greedily. Su Wanning exhaled in relief and glanced toward Lin Yi. Lin Yi sipped his broth slowly, a look of pure contentment softening his features. Catching her gaze, he gave her a thumbs up. The 3 of them huddled around the stove, polishing off every last drop of soup in the pot. Yi Wuhan alone finished 2 full bowls. Only once the bowl was empty did he realize how voraciously he had eaten. A faint blush tinted his cheeks as he turned his head away. "I've only lived off nutrient paste for years. This is just a welcome change of flavor." "Sure, whatever you say." Su Wanning nodded dismissively and gathered the dirty tableware. Lin Yi stepped outside to wash the bowls, leaving Su Wanning and Yi Wuhan alone inside the hut. Yi Wuhan leaned back against the wall, silver hair draped over his shoulders, violet eyes half-lidded, on the verge of slumber. Still, he forced himself to stay awake, unwilling to reveal his vulnerability to a stranger. Su Wanning walked over and crouched before him. Yi Wuhan's eyes flew wide open, sharp with wariness. "What are you doing?" "Tending your injury. What else would you think I'm after? You're in such a pitiful state. Even if I had ill intentions, you'd be powerless to stop me." Su Wanning gestured to his forehead. A gash lingered near his hairline, its blood crusted solid, surrounded by dark bruising, evidence of more than one harsh blow. Su Wanning pulled a tube of green ointment from her pocket. It was a supply from her spatial ring, crafted from mutated plants back in the apocalypse. Potent at reducing inflammation and dulling pain. She dabbed a small amount onto her fingertip and smoothed it gently across his wound. Yi Wuhan's body stiffened instantly. Not from the cool salve, but from the light brush of her fingers. Soft, warm fingertips lined with faint calluses gliding tenderly over his forehead. The sensation dragged up a distant memory from long ago of his mother doing the very same, tending his wounds with gentle care. "There's no need for you to do this." He shut his eyes, voice barely audible. "You belong to me. You'd do well to remember that. I won't like you half as much if that pretty face of yours is scarred." Su Wanning continued applying the ointment without pause. Once she finished, Su Wanning turned to rearrange their sleeping mats. She fetched her own blanket and laid it beside Yu Wuhin's spot. "You rest here tonight. I'll squeeze in with Lin Yi." "Lin Yi? Who exactly is he?" "I thought he was merely your friend. If you claim I'm yours, why would you share sleeping quarters with him? Are you jealous all of a sudden?" "I am not. Look at your scrawny frame. I hold no interest whatsoever," Yu Wuhin snapped, turning his head away with a haughty pout. "Is that so?" Su Wanning leaned in close to him without warning. "What are you doing?" Panic flickered across Yu Wuhin's face. "Nothing," she grinned and turned to leave. Elsewhere, Lin Yi and Su Wanning huddled inside the cramped side partition. Lin Yi offered Su Wanning his blanket, propping himself against the wall as he tinkered with a scrap mechanical component in his hands. "Can't sleep?" Su Wanning asked. "You've been acting strange all day. Where did those vegetables and canned meat come from? And what are your plans for Yu Wuhin?" Lin Yi fixed his gaze on her. Su Wanning deliberated her words. Lin Yi was different from Yu Wuhin. He had stood beside the original owner for 18 years and knew every detail of her miserable life. She needed an explanation that would not arouse his suspicion. "I fainted for 2 full days, didn't I? I stumbled upon a stroke of luck. My psychic power awakened, and I gained a WinD-type ability too. I also found a spatial storage device hidden among the trash, stocked with those supplies." Lin Yi's eyes widened with anxiety. "Truly? Do you intend to return to the Su Marquis household?" "No. I can build whatever life I want on my own." Meanwhile, high above the junk star's surface, the military starship descended steadily. Gu Yuan stood within the command cabin, his psychic power spreading out like an invisible net to skin every inch of the filthy planet beneath him. He felt it at last. The moment the vessel began its descent, he sensed a flicker of light. Faint yet steady, like a candle flame flickering in endless darkness. No, wait. There was not one light source. 3 distinct glows. Yet one burned far brighter than the rest, a sun compressed down to the size of a fist, buried deep amid the mountains of scrap waste. Gu Yuan's dark eyes flew wide, a spark igniting deep within their depths. He had searched for an entire year. That unique psychic wavelength capable of calming his raging power had finally appeared. "General, we have reached the designated landing zone. Shall we touch down?" the adjutant inquired. "Land," Gu Yuan ordered. "Select a small squad to accompany me ashore. The rest remain on standby." "General, you intend to venture down personally?" The adjutant stared at him anxiously. "Your current psychic state." "I gave my order." "Descend." The adjutant fell silent. The starship touched down smoothly on one of the junk star's few relatively flat stretches of terrain, kicking up billowing clouds of dust. Gu Yuan pulled on his heavy military overcoat and descended the boarding ramp. The planet's wind bit sharply, tiny metal fragments stinging his exposed cheeks. Every soldier accompanying him donned protective face masks, yet Gu Yuan wore none. He closed his eyes and unleashed his psychic power to its full extent. That radiant light was not far from here. "General, which sector shall we search first?" A squad captain stepped forward to request orders. "East." Gu Yuan opened his eyes. "I will go alone. All of you wait here." "General." "That is a direct command." Ignoring the squad's protests, Gu Yuan set off eastward by himself. His psychic mania worsened with every step, a searing headache lancing through his skull, as though he trod upon shards of broken glass. Yet the presence of that brilliant light dulled the worst of his agony, offering a fleeting reprieve. He could not fathom what lay at the source of that glow. A person? Or an object? Whatever it was, he had to find it at all costs. Time was running out for him. An SSS-grade ability wielder, the Empire's unmatched guardian, with no psychic capable of harmonizing his power, on the brink of total psychic collapse. He had watched countless predecessors perish young, their unregulated power tearing their minds apart. He did not fear death, yet he refused to die without purpose. That psychic signature, it radiated a purity and strength unlike anything he had ever encountered. If her master could soothe it, perhaps it might survive. Gu Yuan quickened his pace. Far away on the core planet, the Su household had just received a report of abnormal psychic energy fluctuations. The report read, "Garbage star GN-137. Ultra SSS rank psychic energy surge detected, suspected psychic awakening. Note: an abandoned infant of the Su clan was left in this region 18 years ago. Deep into the night, inside the Marquis Manor study, Su Shinshan, head of the Su family, stared rigidly at the report, his fingers trembling faintly. Su Wanning, he whispered the name under his breath. That granddaughter they'd cast aside 18 years ago, she'd actually awakened Ultra SSS rank psychic power? He drew a deep breath and activated his communicator. Send personnel to the Psychic Energy Administration first thing tomorrow morning. Dispatch a team to GN 137 at once. Yi Wuhan could not recall when he'd fallen asleep. Perhaps the bowl of meat broth had worked its magic. Or maybe the faint grassy scent on the thin blanket felt strange yet reassuring. More likely, he was simply utterly exhausted. Ever since being poisoned, he had not slept a single full night. But he jolted awake all of a sudden. Someone was approaching. Footsteps halted outside the door. Yi Wuhan lightened his breathing. Silence lingered outside for several heartbeats, followed by 2 soft knocks. Su Wanning stirred awake. You heard that too, she asked in a quiet voice. MHM, Yi Wuhan lowered his tone. Don't open the door. No good folks come calling at this hour on a garbage star. Su Wanning shot him a glance, ignored his warning, and strode straight for the doorway. I told you not to open it, Yi Wuhan tried to stand, yet his body was far weaker than he'd anticipated. His knees buckled, and he nearly crumpled to the floor. Su Wanning had already pulled the door wide. A lone figure stood outside. Tremendously tall. That was Su Wanning's first thought. She stood 165 centimeters herself, but the man before her was at least 190 centimeters tall, with broad shoulders, a narrow waist, and long limbs. He wore a black military overcoat. The insignia on his epaulets was indistinct in the dark. He had black hair and dark eyes, sharp, chiseled features, and an old scar at the tail of his left eyebrow that flickered faintly in the dim glow. He resembled some colossal wild beast, calm, restrained, yet ready to erupt at any moment. And his dark eyes were fixed unblinkingly on Su Wanning. No, that was not quite right. To be precise, he stared at the faint aura clinging to her body, invisible to ordinary people. Su Wanning's pupils constricted slightly. This man, he could see her psychic energy. For 10 years in the apocalypse, her psychic ability had reached Tier 10, dense enough to take tangible form visible to the naked eye. After transmigrating to this world, her apocalyptic psychic power fused with this realm's brand of psychic energy, forming a faint, firefly-like halo that swirled around her frame. Ordinary humans could not perceive it, but this man could. It meant his psychic rank stood staggeringly high enough to sense her aura. Who are you? Su Wanning asked, her tone as placid as if inquiring about the weather. The man outside did not answer immediately. He simply stood there, dark eyes locked onto her, his Adam's apple bobbing once. That gaze, there was no easy way to describe it. Like a traveler who'd trekked endless barren desert and suddenly laid eyes on an oasis. No greed, no fanaticism. Only a near-reverent, disbelieving stare. Gu Yuan. He finally spoke, his voice deep with a barely perceptible hoarseness. Executive Officer of the 7th Legion of the Imperial Central Army. At the sound of that name, Yi Wuhan's pupils shrank violently where he stood behind her. Gu Yuan. The Empire's youngest executive officer, holder of SSS rank combat prowess. One of the top 10 strongest warriors across the entire Empire. What was he doing on a garbage star? Moreover, there was something off about his state. Though Yi Wuhan's power had faded drastically, his observational skills remained sharp. The man standing in the frigid wind outside held himself ramrod straight in immaculate uniform, yet his psychic energy fluctuated wildly. It was like a volcano on the verge of eruption. These were mid-stage symptoms of psychic rampage. No warrior could match his SSS rank strength, and his psychic power was tearing itself apart. Naturally, Su Wanning sensed it too. The psychic energy churning inside him was absurdly powerful, akin to a raging ocean. But right now that sea raged uncontrollably, ready to burst through every barrier within him at any second. Why would an executive officer travel all the way to a garbage star in the dead of night? Su Wanning questioned. Gu Yuan fell silent for 2 beats. I'm searching for someone, he said. Who? You. A scoff escaped Yi Wuhan from behind her. Su Wanning did not turn around, merely lifted an eyebrow. Searching for me? A worthless nobody from a garbage star. Am I worth the personal attention of an executive officer? You are not worthless. Gu Yuan's tone was flat yet unshakable, as though stating an unarguable fact. Yours is the highest psychic energy rank I have ever encountered. A hush fell over the small room. Yi Wuhan's gaze snapped sharply to Su Wanning's back. Psychic energy? She possessed psychic power? That could not be. Had the Su clan's abandoned infant not tested with zero psychic energy? The clan had publicly announced it all those years ago, which was why they'd sent her to this garbage star. But Gu Yuan had no reason to lie. An SSS rank executive officer had nothing to gain by deceiving a girl stranded on a worthless garbage planet. Which meant she truly bore psychic power, powerful enough to draw Gu Yuan here himself. Su Wanning stepped sideways to clear the doorway. Come inside. Yi Wuhan frowned sharply. Have you lost your mind? He's a stranger, a military man at that. Why invite him in? He's dying, Su Wanning cut him off, her tone as casual as commenting on a windy day. Mid-stage psychic rampage. Without stabilization, his power will collapse completely in 3 months at most. I'm the only one who can help him. Gu Yuan's body stiffened noticeably. She had seen through his condition. Not only that, her assessment was pinpoint accurate. He had guarded the border star region for a full year, his psychic state deteriorating day by day. Military physicians had given him a maximum of 6 months left. 3 months was a far more precise diagnosis. Come in, Su Wanning repeated. It's freezing out there. It's still cold indoors, but the walls block the wind at least. Gu Yuan shot her a glance and stepped across the threshold. The tiny dwelling already felt cramped with 3 occupants. Adding his towering frame made the space feel stifling. Laney had woken at some point, emerging from the partitioned cubicle with messy hair yet clear, alert eyes free of grogginess from sleep. He glanced at Gu Yuan, his gaze lingering briefly on the military epaulets, then turned calmly to Su Wanning. A guest? MHM, Su Wanning nodded. Turn the energy furnace up higher. The room's far too cold. Laney asked no further questions and turned to adjust the heater. Yi Wuhan leaned against the wall, his violet eyes fixed warily on Gu Yuan like a ruffled cat. Gu Yuan spared him a brief glance and spoke coolly. Yi Wuhan, eldest legitimate son of the Yi clan. I've heard your name. The words sounded polite, yet carried no genuine reverence, more like an identity confirmation. Yi Wuhan let out a cold laugh. To think a distinguished executive officer would know of a useless wretch like me. You've come seeking my psychic stabilization, haven't you? Su Wanning cut straight to the point. Gu Yuan's dark eyes bore into her. Yes. How did you know my psychic energy can soothe yours? Psychic wavelength, Gu Yuan explained. For a year, I've scanned the entire empire for a matching frequency. No entries in the Psychic Energy Administration's database align with mine. But this afternoon, your wavelength suddenly appeared. Suddenly appeared? To be exact, this afternoon. Gu Yuan paused. Most psychic awakenings manifest at birth, though some surface on the individual's 18th birthday. Su Wanning understood instantly. The original girl had turned 18 that day, her latent psychic power awakening on her birthday. After her transmigration, Su Wanning's Tier 10 apocalyptic psychic ability had fused with this world's psychic energy, triggering a fundamental transformation. That rendered her wavelength uniquely distinctive. And Gu Yuan's search system had locked onto that signal. So you rushed here overnight. I did. Su Wanning fell quiet for a moment, then made a move that stunned everyone present. She walked over to Gu Yuan and held out her palm, facing upward. Give me your hand. Gu Yuan stared at her pale outstretched palm and did not move. You wanted stabilization, did you not? Su Wanning said. I'll first test whether I can calm your rampaging power. If it works, we can discuss what comes next. Yi Wuhan's lips parted as if to speak, yet he said nothing in the end. Lin Yi finished adjusting the furnace and stood quietly observing from the side. Gu Yuan slowly lifted his right hand and rested it atop Su Wanning's palm. His hand was large, fingers long and defined, thick calluses coating his palm. Marks left by years of wielding firearms and piloting mechs. Beside his, Su Wanning's hands looked tiny, almost childlike. The instant their skin touched, Su Wanning released a wisp of her psychic power. Not the full extent of her strength, merely a thin thread that flowed through their joined palms and into Gu Yuan's body. Gu Yuan's frame shuddered violently. The sensation was indescribable, like parched earth finally receiving life-giving rain, like a suffocating gasp of fresh air for a drowning man. His raging psychic power was forcibly quieted in that instant, not merely suppressed temporarily, but genuinely soothed from an external source. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, something fragile shattered within his dark irises. It works. His voice grew hoarser than before. I know. Su Wanning pulled her hand away, her expression unruffled. Your condition is worse than I anticipated. A single session won't suffice. You'll need regular, long-term stabilization. But I can halt the rampage for good. She paused and looked up at him. What do you plan to do? Gu Yuan stared at his empty palm, still tingling with the warmth of her fingertips. He had not felt anything like this in a very long time. Not the gratification of being needed as an executive officer, nor the dread he inspired as a powerful warrior, but the quiet relief of a dying man being pulled back from the brink. I will submit an official matching application to the Psychic Energy Administration, he said. I only completed a matching bond with Yu Wuhin today. If you seek a match with me, you must accept his presence, and I will not tolerate betrayal, Su Wanning stated. Gu Yuan held her gaze steady. I am a soldier. Once I commit, I will never betray you. Your psychic rank is unprecedented. The core planet authorities have almost certainly received word by now. They will send envoys to verify your power level, and once confirmed, the news will shake every star region. Suitors seeking a matching bond with you will line up all the way from the garbage star to the core planet. I hold the advantage of arriving first. Very well, she said. But you must agree to several conditions. Speak your terms. First, there is no rush with the matching bond. Give me time to adjust. I only turned 18 today, and I have barely processed this new identity. That is acceptable. Second, keep your visit to this garbage star confidential for the time being. I have no wish to attract unnecessary trouble. Agreed. Third, Su Wanning glanced around the dilapidated room. Bring proper food when you come next time. Natural produce, not synthetic nutrient paste. Gu Yuan froze for a split second. Lin Yi could not hold back a quiet chuckle in the background. Yi Wuhin turned his head aside, the corners of his mouth twitching involuntarily. Understood, he replied. This time, a faint warmth softened his tone. Outside the window, the bitter wind of garbage star howled on without end. Yet inside the shabby little dwelling, the glow of the energy furnace stretched 4 long shadows across the floor. Meanwhile, far out along the flight path from the core planet to GN-137, a vessel belonging to the Psychic Energy Administration raced forward at maximum warp speed. 3 passengers occupied the ship, a representative dispatched by the Su clan, a ranking inspector from the Psychic Energy Administration, and an uninvited journalist. Ultra SSS rank psychic detected on garbage star GN-137, suspected abandoned Su clan infant. By dawn, this headline would spread across the entire empire. Is something the matter? Why have you returned again? I asked. Step inside, she said. It's freezing out here. Gu Yuan finally turned to face her. His dark eyes were shrouded in shadow, his expression unreadable. Yet Su Wanning could feel the weight of his stare, deep, tangled with an indefinable emotion. I just received transmission. The administration's vessel departed the core planet and will arrive tomorrow, Gu Yuan reported flatly, as if delivering a military briefing. Su Wanning's hand stilled mid-motion. Fear was not the cause. She'd only been in this world for a single day. 24 hours prior, she had perished alongside the zombie king in the apocalypse, and now she faced an alien realm filled with complete strangers. She sighed silently to herself, no flicker of emotion crossing her face. Let them come, she said. They can hardly drag me away against my will. Gu Yuan's dark eyes glinted faintly. They will not touch you. I am here to protect you. I shall return to my ship now and come back tomorrow morning. Su Wanning shot him a glance, offered no reply, and walked back into the house. Gu Yuan watched her enter, gently pulled the door shut behind her, and turned toward his military craft. Inside the room, Lin Yi was wide awake. He had not been roused by noise, he had barely slept at all. Ever since the military officer arrived the night before, he lingered in a half-doze. Not out of distrust, he knew the name Gu Yuan, the Empire's youngest executive officer with SSS rank combat power. A man of his standing had no reason to harm insignificant residents of a garbage star. It was simply instinct. Everyone raised on garbage star learned the habit, perpetual vigilance, to ensure no one stole your last tube of nutrient paste while you slept. Lin Yi leaned against the cubicle wall, twisting a mechanical part absently between his fingers. When Su Wanning stepped back inside, he set the component down and wore his usual gentle smile. Couldn't sleep. MHM. Su Wanning sat down beside him and lowered her voice. Did I wake you? Not at all. Linny glanced toward the door. What did he speak to you about? He said the administration's team is en route, arriving tomorrow. Representatives from the Sioux clan are with them, plus a journalist. Linny's fingers paused on the metal part before resuming their idle twisting. Will the Sioux clan take you away? They cannot make me leave, Suwanning said firmly. I am not going anywhere. Linny looked at her, soft amber light swimming in his eyes. Very well, he said, a single quiet word. Suwanning's lips tugged upward into a faint smile. At 5 o'clock in the early morning, Gu Yuan opened a comms channel to the Military Affairs Office of the 7th Legion Garrison. The duty officer who answered sounded tense, receiving a direct transmission from an executive officer at 5 a.m. unnerved anyone. General, await your orders. Issue a temporary quarantine order for GN-137 effective immediately. The duty officer hesitated. General, what grounds shall I list for the quarantine? Unidentified stellar beast activity detected along the border of our defense zone. Mandatory safety sweep required. Gu Yuan's tone held no inflection, as though reciting memorized military protocol. All civilian spacecraft are prohibited from landing on GN-137 for the duration of the quarantine. The Psychic Energy Administration's vessel will be held in orbit under military oversight. Their personnel are to remain aboard the orbital station and forbidden from entering the atmosphere. The duty officer fell silent for 2 seconds, processing the extraordinary command. General, he asked cautiously, should I alert the Biological Survey Division regarding the stellar beast sightings? That will not be necessary. And what is the quarantine's expiry window? 3 days. If the sweep concludes within those 3 days, we will reassess matters once the 3 days elapse. The duty officer asked no further questions. He recognized this was a non-negotiable order. Understood. I will process the order at once. The comms channel cut off. His mind drifted back to the stabilization session the night before. When her palm rested against his forehead, his raging psychic power had settled as though a gentle hand had calmed a storm. The sensation was utterly foreign, leaving him unsure how to process it. He had encountered countless psychics before. The military employed dedicated psychic soothers. None could match his wavelength. Though temporary minor stabilization was occasionally possible. When those soothers laid hands on his forehead, his power quieted slightly. Yet it felt like smothering a wildfire beneath a thick blanket, forced suppression. Suwanning was different. When her palm rested on his brow, his psychic energy was not suppressed, it simply stopped raging. The fire still burned, yet no longer a destructive wildfire, but a steady hearth flame. Warm, controllable, something he longed to draw near to. Gu Yuan struggled to put the feeling into words. All he knew was that he craved more of it. Abruptly, his eyes flew open, his gaze sharpening sharply. Someone was approaching. It was his adjutant, Zhou, a man in his early 30s who had served beside Gu Yuan for 3 years. Adjutant Zhou ran toward him, sweat beading his forehead, not from heat. Temperatures on Garbage Star were far too frigid for that, but from frantic urgency. General, he gasped for breath. The quarantine order has been issued, yet the Psychic Energy Administration has filed an official formal protest. Gu Yuan's expression remained impassive. Who lodged it? The lead inspector in their party, Zhao Min. She requests an immediate direct comms link with you. Patch it through. Lieutenant Zhou froze for a split second. He'd assumed Gu Yuan would turn the call away. For every previous protest of this kind, Gu Yuan had always delegated the matter to his subordinates. But today, the general had said, patch it through. Lieutenant Zhou immediately pulled out his portable comm terminal and established the signal link. Seconds later, Zhao Min's face appeared on the screen. She was in her 40s, her features stern, her hair pulled back in an immaculate bun, clad in the dark navy uniform of the Psionic Affairs Administration. The bulkhead of a starship formed her backdrop. She was already en route. General Gu, Zhao Min's tone was polite, yet edged with sharpness. I've received word that a temporary quarantine order has been issued for GN-137, citing Starbeast sweeps as the reasoning. I've reviewed the military's public logs. There have been 0 recorded Starbeast sightings in the vicinity of GN-137 over the past month. Gu Yuan stared straight at her. Inspector Zhao is quite familiar with military archives. It is part of my job. Zhao Min did not flinch beneath his gaze. Psionic awakening registration must be completed within 72 hours, per imperial law. Miss Su's awakening occurred yesterday. The 72-hour legal window expires tomorrow evening at 7. If your quarantine order remains in effect for 3 full days, it will exceed the statutory deadline. So, what do you want? I ask that you provide a definitive end date for the quarantine. We can hold position at the orbital space station, but should the 72-hour limit lapse, I hold the authority to file an emergency forced landing order. Gu Yuan fell silent for 2 beats. Then he spoke. The quarantine order lifts tomorrow morning. Zhao Min blinked in obvious surprise. Tomorrow? Your lieutenant stated 3 days just moments ago. Fresh intelligence came in. Starbeast migration paths have shifted. We aim to finish all sweeps by tomorrow. Gu Yuan's voice carried no trace of deception. You may land first thing tomorrow morning. Zhao Min fixed him with an unwavering stare, as if weighing whether his words held truth. After several seconds, she nodded. Very well. I will arrive promptly tomorrow morning. The comm channel cut out. Lieutenant Zhou stood beside his general, mouth agape, burning to ask a question, yet too hesitant to voice it. Speak, Gu Yuan ordered. Sir, regarding the Starbeast threat, we have uncovered absolutely no trace of Starbeast activity whatsoever, Lieutenant Zhou ventured cautiously. Gu Yuan shot him a single glance. The look held no discernible emotion, yet Lieutenant Zhou's spine turned cold for no clear reason. We have trace evidence now, Gu Yuan said flatly. Lieutenant Zhou, understood, sir. He hurried off at once to manufacture the required evidence. Su Wanning was jolted fully awake by voices echoing outside. She stepped to the doorway just as Gu Yuan terminated the comms call. Beneath the murky, ashen daylight, he stood amid a jumble of discarded scrap metal, his military overcoat crisp and tailored, jarringly out of place amid the desolate surroundings. Like a military blade thrust into a garbage heap. Su Wanning leaned against the doorframe and watched him for a long moment. Gu Yuan sensed her gaze and turned around. Did I wake you? He asked. No. I never slept soundly to begin with. Su Wanning rubbed her bleary eyes. Who were you speaking to just now? My lieutenant. And an agent from the Psionic Affairs Administration. Su Wanning's movements stilled. What did they want? Gu Yuan walked over and halted at the threshold. He towered far above her. To meet his eyes, she had to tilt her head all the way back. I issued a quarantine order. They cannot land today, Gu Yuan explained. They won't arrive until tomorrow morning. Su Wanning blinked. You blocked them? Why? I wanted to hear your thoughts. What you plan to do once your psionic rating is officially confirmed. The Imperial Corps will never allow you to remain on a scrap planet. You are far too vital to the Empire. She stepped outside the dwelling and tilted her head upward to gaze at the dull, gray sky. The atmosphere of the scrap planet was perpetually shrouded this way, ashy, devoid of visible stars or sun, only a thick haze of unidentified particulate matter suspended in the air. Gu Yuan, she said suddenly. Will my psionic power keep leaking outward as long as I live? Gu Yuan moved to stand beside her. He grasped her meaning well, not merely spreading outward, but surging forth unconfined, like an unlatched gate spilling everything trapped within. Yes, he answered. Psionics naturally radiate unique wavelength signatures. The higher the rating, the broader the emission range. Yours, he paused briefly. It is extraordinarily powerful. Your signature can be detected across the entire star sector. Su Wanning lapsed into quiet contemplation. So no matter if I wish it or not, they will find me eventually? Yes. Su Wanning dropped her gaze to stare at her own hands. These hands had slain countless zombies during the apocalypse, cultivated endless crops, saved dozens of lives, and bid farewell to countless others. She had never been one to flee from hardship. But for the first time, she craved escape desperately. Not out of fear. Out of weariness. Tired of being treated as a tool. Back in the apocalypse, she'd been the base's strongest psionic fighter. Everyone's eyes on her spoke one unspoken truth. She could slaughter zombies, grow food, shield the survivors. She was grateful for those who relied on her, yet late at night, a question would gnaw at her mind. If she possessed no special powers, would anyone care for her at all? Now, transported to an entirely new world, the same dilemma had resurfaced. The Su clan sought her not for who Su Wanning was, but for her formidable psionic ability. Gu Yuan sought her out not for who Su Wanning was, but because only she could soothe his fractured mind. She had no answer to that question. But she longed to find someone who saw her, not her psionic power, someone content to stay trapped on this broken planet and share a simple bowl of hot soup with her. Let me think on it, she said, turning to head back inside the house. Gu Yuan remained outside, watching her figure vanish behind the door. He did not follow her in. He had read the emotion in her eyes. It was not a cry for assistance. It was a plea for solitude. He had studied military psychology during his service, trained to judge when to draw near and when to step back. Now was the time to retreat. Inside the dwelling, Lin Yi was repairing the energy furnace. He squatted on the floor, tools and spare parts scattered all around him, his palms smudged with black machine grease. He lifted his head the moment Su Wanning stepped inside, his signature gentle smile softening his features. "What's wrong? You look worn out." Su Wanning knelt beside him, staring blankly at the pile of mechanical components for a long while. Lin Yi. If someone came to drag you away from this place, would you go? Lin Yi's hands froze mid-motion. He set down the wrench in his grasp, twisted to face her, and studied her with unwavering sincerity. "It depends on who's coming, whether they truly wish to bring me home, or if they have ulterior motives. But no matter where life takes us, I will stay by your side," he said. Su Wanning looked at him. Amber eyes, chestnut hair, that perpetual mild smile. Lin Yi had been the first person she'd met on the scrap planet, or rather, the first person the original inhabitant of this body had known. When the original girl was small, scavenging through trash heaps, she'd crossed paths with Lin Yi. Digging through scrap just as she was, two children abandoned by the world, bound together by shared misfortune. In the original girl's fragmented memories, Lin Yi had never uttered a single complaint. He never mourned being stranded on this desolate rock, never resented surviving off discarded scrap. He simply endured, quietly, stubbornly clinging to life. Once Su Wanning's consciousness took hold of this body, he devoted himself to caring for her. He saved the nutrient paste for her alone, surrendered the thickest blankets to her bedside, and sat vigil through every feverish night when she fell ill. "You don't want to leave," Su Wanning said slowly. "But what if they force you to go?" Lin Yi pondered her words, then did something that caught Su Wanning entirely off guard. He pulled a small item from his pocket and pressed it into her open palm, a single piece of candy. Su Wanning had made the candy herself, simmering sweet grass accelerated by her wood element psionic ability. She'd only produced a handful. Yesterday, she'd given one to Yi Wuhen and one to Lin Yi. Lin Yi had never eaten his piece. He'd kept it safe all this time. Wanning, Lin Yi's voice was soft as the rare faint breeze that occasionally swept across the scrap planet. "Do you remember when you came down with a 3-day fever at 10 years old? I diluted our last tube of nutrient paste 3 times over with plain water and fed you that mixture for 3 full days. When your fever finally broke, the first words you spoke upon opening your eyes were, 'Lin Yi, we're still alive.'" A sharp ache pricked Su Wanning's nasal cavity. She remembered that moment clearly. It was not her own memory, but the original girl's, yet the recollection felt vivid, as though she'd lived through it herself. "Ever since then, I've known one thing," Lin Yi continued quietly. "As long as we're alive, everything else is secondary. Wherever you go, I go." Su Wanning tightened her fingers around the candy in her palm. "All right," she said simply. No flowery words of gratitude, no emotional embrace. Just one quiet affirmation. But Lin Yi understood exactly what she meant. He smiled faintly, lowering his head to resume repairing the furnace. Su Wanning watched him work for a moment, then reached out, plucked the wrench from his hands, and twisted a loose bolt for him. The two knelt side by side, silent, finishing repairs on the energy furnace together. Yi Wuhen had observed every exchange. He leaned against the partition wall, eyes closed, feigning sleep, but his ears caught every word spoken outside. He had not slept a wink since dawn. It was not merely unfamiliar bedding, though he struggled to rest anywhere but his own chambers. That was not the core of his unrest. His mind spun endlessly around a single, nagging thought. Why was he here? He was the legitimate eldest heir of the Yi clan, once a prodigy, the designated future marquis. Only 1 year prior, he had been the empire's most celebrated young noble. Every soul who crossed his path addressed him deferentially as young Master Yi. Now look at him. Cast aside onto this worthless scrap planet by a stepmother, assigned to a girl equally discarded by her family. It was laughable. What struck him as even more absurd was how little the girl cared for his noble lineage. The way she regarded him was identical to how she looked at Lin Yi and Gu Yuan. No scorn, no pity, just the plain, unremarkable gaze one might direct at any stranger. Yi Wuhen could not fathom why this trivial detail weighed so heavily on his mind. He shifted his weight beneath the thin blanket, producing a soft rustle. Something hard dug into his hip through his pocket. He reached inside and touched 2 candies. The one she'd given him yesterday, and the one from earlier today. He'd kept both. He could not explain why he'd held onto them either. Perhaps it had simply been far too long since anyone had offered him something sweet. Yi Wuhan curled his fingers around the candies, shut his eyes tight, and pretended to slumber. By morning, Su Wanning had brewed Yi Wuhan's medicinal tonic. Dark brown liquid steamed gently inside a chipped ceramic bowl, releasing the sharp, bitter aroma of wild medicinal herbs. Su Wanning carried the bowl to the partition. Yi Wuhan sat propped against the wall, a tattered e-reader open across his knees, salvaged by Lin Yi, its storage filled with mechanical engineering reference materials. "Drink your medicine." Su Wanning held out the bowl to him. Yi Wuhan glanced down at the dark brew, his brow furrowing. "What concoction is this?" "I told you I can purge the toxins from your system. Drink it. With a body as fragile as yours, do you really think I'd poison you?" She extended the bowl toward him and turned to leave. "Wait a moment," Yi Wuhan called after her. Su Wanning glanced back. Yi Wuhan gripped the bowl, violet eyes fixed on her, his lips parting and closing repeatedly, as if debating whether to voice something unspoken. At last, he murmured quietly, barely audible, "Thank you. If this medicine truly works, I will keep my word." Su Wanning met his gaze, offered no casual "you're welcome," and displayed no surprise at his rare gratitude. She simply nodded and walked away. Yi Wuhan lifted the bowl to his lips and drained every last drop of the bitter tonic slowly. It tasted overwhelmingly bitter. Yet after swallowing, a gentle warmth spread through his stomach, lightening the dull ache permeating his entire frame, easing his constant discomfort. Su Wanning wandered alone to the empty lot behind the dwelling. She needed time alone to sort through her thoughts. The plot of land was small, sandwiched between two towering mounds of discarded scrap metal, sheltered from harsh winds. The planet's murky gray light, if it could even be called sunlight, filtered down for several hours each day. The ground consisted of soft soil mixed with fragmented metal and unidentified industrial residue, but at the very least, it was earth. Su Wanning knelt and scooped up a handful of dirt, kneading it loosely between her palms. 10 years spent surviving the apocalypse had forged an innate intuition within her for soil quality. This earth was compacted, overly alkaline, and woefully lacking organic matter. Seeds planted directly into it might germinate, but they would never thrive. But she possessed wood element's ionic powers. She had no need to amend the soil itself, she only needed to strengthen the seeds. Su Wanning retrieved a small pouch of seeds from her spatial ring, collected during the apocalypse: bok choy, radishes, tomatoes, cucumbers. They were no rare exotic strains, yet they boasted hardy vitality, high yields, and pleasant flavor profiles. She tipped several seeds into the center of her palm. Memories of the apocalypse crashed unbidden over her mind. The soil back at the survivor base had been scarcely better than this, saturated with zombie viral contamination. She had been the sole individual capable of growing viable crops, rising before dawn each day to coax seeds to life bit by bit with her wood psionics. Over 300 survivors had relied solely on her labor to eat. No one had ever paused to ask if she grew weary. Everyone simply assumed that as a psionic fighter, tending crops required no real exertion. Su Wanning curled her fingers around the seeds and squeezed her eyes shut. This place was different. There were no zombies here, no mutated flora, no life or death battles waged daily. She bore no responsibility to feed hundreds of strangers. She only needed to sustain herself and whoever chose to stay beside her. Su Wanning opened her eyes and began turning over the soil. She wielded a salvaged scrap blade as a makeshift shovel, digging stroke by heavy stroke. The compacted dirt resisted every thrust, and fine beads of sweat soon dotted her forehead. Yet she did not stop. One lesson the apocalypse had hammered into her: physical exhaustion quieted the endless tangled thoughts swirling in her head. 30 minutes into her labor, Lin Yi appeared beside her. He watched her kneeling to till the soil, asked no questions, and silently retreated to fetch his own handcrafted, simple digging tools before returning to squat beside her, working the earth alongside her. Neither of them spoke a word, lost in quiet shared labor. The planet's dull gray solar orb drifted slowly overhead, stretching and shortening their paired shadows across the dirt. Another 20 minutes passed before Su Wanning broke the silence. "Lin Yi, aren't you curious what I'm doing?" Lin Yi never paused his digging motions. "Whatever you wish to do, I will help you." A faint smile tugged at the corners of Su Wanning's mouth. She did not offer another word of thanks. Children raised on the scrap planet did not waste breath on empty gratitude. They expressed thanks through action. You aid me, I aid you, so we might both survive. Once the plot was fully tilled, Su Wanning scattered the seeds across the loose soil, covered them with a thin layer of dirt, and patted the surface gently with her palm. She did not force rapid growth. At least, not drastically. She only released a faint wisp of wood element psionic energy to rouse the dormant seeds, not to make them sprout instantly, but to send them a quiet signal that conditions were viable for growth. They would germinate naturally after that. Their growth rate would be marginally faster than standard, yet not unnaturally rapid enough to arouse suspicion. No one would grow suspicious. Su Wanning stood upright, brushed soil from her palms, and stared out at the freshly turned plot. The garden patch was tiny, barely a few square meters in size. But this marked the very first thing she had planted with her own 2 hands in this new world. Once the crops mature, she told Linny, I'll cook you something delicious. Linny grinned, his amber eyes crinkling into soft crescent moons. I'll wait patiently. After finishing the planting, Su Wanning sought out Gu Yuan. Gu Yuan was completing physical conditioning on another empty lot east of the dwelling, simple push-ups and squats, no specialized equipment in sight. He had shed his military overcoat, leaving only the black uniform shirt beneath, sleeves rolled up to his forearms to reveal defined, solid muscle. Su Wanning approached as he finished a set of push-ups. She did not call out to him, merely stood aside and waited for him to conclude his workout. Gu Yuan had sensed her arrival the moment she drew near. His psionic perception tracked her every movement. Still, he did not pause mid-set, completing his final reps before standing and slinging his overcoat over one shoulder. You needed something? He asked. Su Wanning replied. I do. I wanted to ask you a question. Speak your mind. You mentioned psionic wavelength signatures earlier. Can I stop them from radiating outward entirely? Gu Yuan fixed his gaze on her. You mean containing your psionic power within your body? Yes. Trapping it all inside me, no overflow, no outward radiation, undetectable by any scanner. Gu Yuan fell silent for several seconds, studying Su Wanning's features intently, gauging whether her request was earnest or merely idle speculation. Theoretically, he said slowly, it is possible. High-tier psionics can train to regulate the volume of power leaking from their bodies. But I have only read of one individual capable of complete containment, recorded within top-secret military archives. Who is that person? He has long since passed away, the Empire's second recorded SSS plus rank psionic. In his later years, he mastered full psionic suppression. Yet his rigorous training regimen took 3 full years to perfect. Su Wanning did not flinch at the mention of 3 years. Did they document his training methods? They exist, locked within the military's encrypted central database. Access requires high-level security clearance. Can you retrieve them? Gu Yuan locked eyes with her. Her dark irises held perfect calm, no urgency, no anxiety, only sincere curiosity as she waited for his answer. Yes, he said. But I need a justification. Accessing that file requires legitimate military grounds. I can't pull it just because I want to read it. Su Wanning thought for a moment. What if I say I need to study psychic containment techniques to assist Executive Gu Yuan with his psychic stabilization? Would that hold up? Gu Yuan stared at her, a flicker of emotion stirring in his black eyes. It will, he replied. Su Wanning nodded. Then I'll trouble you. She turned to leave, but Gu Yuan called after her. Su Wanning, why are you hiding your power? He asked. Su Wanning paused, then gave him an answer. Because I refuse to be treated like a tool. Gu Yuan's pupils narrowed slightly. In the Su clan's eyes, I'm nothing but a vessel for psychic power. To the Empire, I'm a rare resource. To you, she trailed off, perhaps someone who can save your life. Gu Yuan said nothing, yet his fingers tightened around the hem of his coat. Su Wanning met his gaze without flinching, staring straight into his eyes. I'm not saying any of that is wrong. You need stabilization, and I can provide it, that's fair. But I want something more than mere fairness. What do you want? Gu Yuan's voice came out rough and husky. Su Wanning pondered the question, then smiled, not a polite, perfunctory tug of the lips, but a genuine smile blooming from deep within, eyes crinkling, faint dimples showing on her cheeks. She longed to say, I want to sleep soundly through the night. I want someone to share meals with. I want to wake each morning knowing there are no zombies to fight, no shelters to defend, no lives waiting for me to save. She looked at Gu Yuan, her voice softening. I want a home. A peaceful, stable home. Your status could make that wish come true for me. A gust of wind swept between them. The winds of Junkstar always carried fine metallic grit that stung the skin. Yet in that moment, neither Su Wanning nor Gu Yuan stepped away. "Very well," Gu Yuan said. A single word. But Su Wanning heard the weight beneath it, not a binding vow, not an ironclad guarantee, just quiet acknowledgement. "I understand." She said no more and walked off. Gu Yuan stood rooted to the spot, watching her figure vanish through the doorway. His thoughts turned inward. "If you'll let me, I'll give you the home you crave. You hold no affection for me now, but once I've set my sights on you, there's nowhere you can run." Afternoon. Gu Yuan returned from outside bearing an object. A palm-sized metal case stamped with military encryption markings. "What's this?" Su Wanning took the case and turned it over in her hands. "The training archives on psychic containment," Gu Yuan answered. Su Wanning's fingers stilled. "You got the approval this quickly?" Gu Yuan ignored her question and flipped open the case directly. A data chip rested inside. "Plug it into a terminal to view the files," he told her. "But this archive is access restricted. You only have 72 hours before it self-destructs." Su Wanning stared at the chip. 72 hours? You only have 1 day to master the basics. Gu Yuan locked eyes with her. The training methods are laid out in full detail in that predecessor's notes. It took him 3 full years to learn complete psychic containment. "As for you..." He hesitated. "Can you pull it off?" Su Wanning curled the chip in her palm. That predecessor spent 3 years figuring out the method from scratch. Now the process is laid out right in front of me. I should manage it. Besides, I don't need full suppression, just to dial my power down a notch. Gu Yuan studied her, no dismissive retort of impossible or don't boast crossing his lips. He simply nodded. All right. Su Wanning carried the chip to the side and slotted it into a beat-up salvage terminal Lin Yi had found. An encrypted document popped up on the screen, titled Psychic Containment Training Notes, for those who come after. Author, Lin Xinghe, the Empire's second SSS plus tier psychic. Su Wanning began to read. Evening. Su Wanning sat alone beside the vegetable plot, the terminal balanced on her knees as she paged slowly through the notes. Lin Xinghe had spent 3 years mastering the technique. Year 1. Learn to contain psychic power so it does not leak out passively. Year 2. Mask one's aura enough to hide one's true psychic tier from detection. Year 3. Draw all psychic power fully inward, indistinguishable from an ordinary human. Su Wanning closed the terminal and shut eyes. 3 years. She did not have 3 years to spare. Not because she lacked patience, but because the Empire, the Su clan, and every faction coveting SSS plus tier psychic power would never grant her that much time. She needed to master this far faster. Su Wanning drew a deep breath and began practicing per the notes. The first step was not compression, it was perception. She had to trace the flow, velocity, and density of her psychic power, much like a hydrologist mapping a river, to fully understand how her aura spilled outward. She closed her eyes and sank her consciousness deep within her body. Lin Xinghe's methodology aligned closely with the techniques she'd honed through a decade of surviving the apocalypse. Lin Xinghe also emphasized diversion. Imagine leaking psychic power as a river. Block it forcefully and the waters will overflow. The solution was not to dam the current, but to redirect it elsewhere. Redirect it where? Back inward. Recapture the spilling psychic power and draw it back into her body, like a sponge soaking up water. Su Wanning attempted the method. She abandoned brute force compression, instead focusing on guidance, coaxing her outward flowing psychic power to reverse course and retreat inside her frame. It proved agonizingly difficult at first. Psychic power naturally surged outward, forcing it to recede felt unnatural. Yet she used her will to gently persuade it, not command it. It was like herding sheep, guiding each stray wandering outside back into the pen one by one. Slowly, her psychic power began to retreat. Not rapidly, yet undeniably pulling inward. Sweat beaded on Su Wanning's forehead, but she did not pause. She kept guiding, reclaiming, tugging every wisp of escaping aura back inside her body bit by bit. Her psychic detection radius shrank steadily, one fully in all directions 500 meters, 200 meters. Finally, the aura fully settled within her. At this pace, by tomorrow morning's inspection, she could lower her detectable tier to S. Truly, past generations plant the trees for later generations to rest in their shade, and 10 years of refining psychic techniques amid the apocalypse had laid critical groundwork for her speed. Su Wanning opened her eyes and exhaled a long breath. Lin Xinghe had needed 3 years. She would not require nearly so long. Over dinner that night, Su Wanning announced her decision. I plan to register my psychic tier tomorrow. Gu Yuan set down his bowl, astonishment etched across his face. Have you already succeeded this quickly? I can stop my aura leaking out entirely now. If I practice through the night, I'll lock my detectable tier at S, low enough not to draw unwanted attention, Su Wanning explained. Yi Wuhan stared at her in shock. You're that talented? That predecessor spent 3 years, and you've cracked it in a single afternoon. Naturally. I'm quite sharp, after all. Su Wanning picked up a mouthful of vegetables, chewed slowly, and swallowed. Tomorrow, I'll let them see an ordinary psychic, she said. No SSS plus tier, no monster, no rare resource. The Empire covets, and the Su clan fights over. Just an S-tier psychic. All I want is to live quietly on Junkstar. Yi Wuhan held her gaze for a long stretch of time. Can the Psychic Management Bureau really not detect your true power? I've never even heard of this containment technique, he questioned. Su Wanning dodged a direct answer, tossing a counter-question back at him. What do you think? Yi Wuhan fell silent. His mind drifted to the medicine she'd given him. It had worked wonders. If her true SSS plus power were revealed on the core homeworld, she would be the center of every eye. Yet, she went to great lengths to conceal her strength, refusing to return. Suit yourself, he huffed, feigning indifference. It has nothing to do with me either way. Su Wanning's lips curved into a faint smile. She saw straight through his lie. Gu Yuan spoke up. Don't worry, it will hold. Few people know this containment art, after all. For most psychics, an SSS tier rating is a badge of honor. No one would choose to hide it voluntarily. That night, Gu Yuan stood sentry by the door. Su Wanning stepped out of the house and sat down beside him. She did not merely stand, she settled onto the ground. Leaning against the opposite door frame, a shoulder's width separating them. Gu Yuan. Thank you for securing that file. It would have brought endless trouble otherwise. No need to thank me. You're the one I've chosen. I'll aid you in anything you require, and this benefits me too. I'd rather not be swamped with rivals vying for you. Is that so? I'll judge you by your actions then. She smiled and brushed her fingers lightly over his hand. I'll prove you won't regret choosing me. His thoughts drifted back to the night prior. After she'd said she wanted a home, he'd stood outside frozen for hours, unable to move. Today, when she'd admitted she loathed being a tool and sought the containment method, his heart had lifted. She shone far too brightly. He longed to hide her away from the world. Yesterday, his motives had only stemmed from her unmatched psychic power, but now he was uncertain. The prospect of building a home by her side filled him with quiet anticipation. Dawn. Su Wanning was roused by light filtering through the room. Not harsh, blistering sunlight, Junkstar had none of that. Instead, a clear, pale blue glow she had never seen before streamed through the dwelling's single tiny window, spilling across her face. Su Wanning squinted out at the sky. The perpetual gray haze seemed marginally brighter than it had been days prior. Perhaps the weather was shifting today. She sat upright and noticed Lin Yi was already awake. Clattering sounds drifted from the stove. Faint movement came from Yi Wuhan's partition. He was awake too, though he had not stepped out. Su Wanning pulled on her coat and walked over to the stove. Lin Yi was heating broth. He smiled when he spotted her. Morning. We're having thick stew today, seasoned with the meat powder Gu Yuan brought. I simmered it longer, so it ought to taste better than yesterday's batch. Su Wanning took the bowl and sipped a spoonful. It's delicious, she said. Lin Yi's smile deepened. They drank their soup in quiet companionship, neither broaching the day's critical errand. Yet both knew today would be unlike any other. 8 a.m. Gu Yuan returned from outside. He had changed into crisp, formal military dress, black fabric pressed sharp, general's insignia glinting coldly beneath the murky sky. His combat boots shone polished, his hair combed into immaculate order, without a strand out of place. Su Wanning shot him a glance. Why are you dressed so formally today? Official business, Gu Yuan replied. Su Wanning wanted to call his bluff, but she held her tongue. She understood he'd donned his uniform for the Psychic Bureau's arrival. If complications arose, his military rank would shield her. None of the officials would suspect Gu Yuan would take her side. What time will they arrive? 9 o'clock sharp. Su Wanning nodded, finished the last of her broth, and stood. I'll go change clothes. Her wardrobe offered little variety, only a handful of faded, threadbare garments, none fully intact. She picked the least tattered one, tucked the sleeve rips inward, and retied her hair neatly. She paused at the doorway and drew a deep breath. Time to face them. 9 a.m. precisely. A shuttle descended through the gray cloud cover. Its engine roar reverberated across Junkstar, shaking piles of discarded scrap metal in the distance until they rattled. Su Wanning stood at the house's entrance, watching the silver spacecraft touch down slowly. Gu Yuan stood one pace behind her, rigid in his uniform, his face impassive. Linny lingered inside the house, peering out the window. Yu Wuhan leaned against the frame of his partition, violet eyes fixed on the shuttle, fingers twisting absently at the edge of his blanket. The shuttle's hatch hissed open. 2 uniformed Psychic Management Bureau staff stepped out first, hauling detection equipment between them. Next came Zhao Min, clad in Navy Bureau uniform, hair pulled into a severe tight bun, her expression stern. Trailing behind her was Wang Zhang, steward of the second Su clan household, a middle-aged man in a gray tailored suit clutching an ornate gift box, plastered with an ingratiating smile. Last to disembark was a young woman. 27 or 28 years old, short hair, wire-rimmed glasses, sharp-cut tailored trousers. Her eyes were bright, and the moment she stepped off the shuttle, she scanned her surroundings, ramshackle housing, mounds of trash, gray skies. Until her gaze locked onto Su Wanning, thoughtful speculation flickering across her features. A reporter. Xinqing. Su Wanning memorized the woman's face silently. Zhao Min marched to the front of the group. She halted directly before Su Wanning and presented her official ID. Miss Su, I am Zhao Min, Senior Examiner of the Imperial Psychic Management Bureau. Military lockdown orders delayed our visit by 1 day yesterday. Today marks the final deadline for your Psychic Awakening registration. We must conduct formal testing and filing now. That's fine, Su Wanning said. Where will the test take place? I brought portable detection gear. We can administer it anywhere. Zhao Min waved the 2 staff members forward. They carried a waist-high metal pillar fitted with a crystal orb atop, transparent and shimmering faintly in the dull light. Place 1 palm flat against the crystal orb and release your psychic power, Zhao Min instructed. Su Wanning glanced at the orb, then back to Zhao Min. Right here. Right here. Su Wanning nodded and stepped forward. Her steps were steady, unhurried, as if completing a trivial chore. Yet every person present fixed their eyes on her hand. Gu Yuan's gaze flicked from the crystal orb to Su Wanning's face, then back to the orb. Yu Wuhan stepped out of the partition to stand in the doorway, violet eyes locked rigidly on Su Wanning's back. Linny set down the mechanical parts he'd been repairing and pressed to the window, amber eyes tight with nervousness. Xinqing activated her recording terminal, aiming its lens straight at Su Wanning. Wang Zhang clutched his gift box, his smile growing stiff and strained. Su Wanning rested her palm against the crystal orb. The surface was icy, colder than Junkstar's frigid air. The instant her fingertips made contact, a faint suction tugged at her skin, as if beckoning her psychic power forth. She drew a deep breath. She released her aura, but only a fraction of it. Like twisting a faucet open just a crack, letting water trickle out without surging forth. The crystal orb lit up, pale blue radiance blooming brighter and stronger from within. Numerals flickered across the equipment's readout, a SSS. When the gauge hit SS, Su Wanning began to pull her aura inward. She could not retract power already spilled, that was impossible. Instead, she restrained the unspent reserve inside her body, halting the outward surge. Like turning the faucet handle back the moment the flow hit SS. The reading hovered briefly at SS+, then plummeted steadily. SSS plus S. At last, the number stabilized at S+. No higher, no lower. A tier powerful enough to stand out, yet far from the terrifying monster rank of SSS+. Zhao Min stared at the stable S+ reading, her brows drawing together faintly. She glanced down at a copy of the 3-day-old test report, which clearly marked SSS+. Then back to the current S+ display. Miss Su, Zhao Min said, your prior test 3 days ago registered SSS+, yet today you read S+. This fluctuation is extremely substantial. Psychic awakenings are unstable in their early stages. Su Wanning pulled her hand away, her tone flat and unruffled. You're the examiner, surely you've seen this kind of variance before. Zhao Min fell silent for 2 beats. Psychic power did often fluctuate right after awakening. But a drop from SSS+ to S+ over 3 days was wildly abnormal, bordering on impossible. Yet the data did not lie. The machine's readout clearly showed S+. And she could not alter the official record merely out of suspicion. Zhao Min jotted the tier on the registration form, S+. Miss Sue, your psychic tier is S+, classified as a high-level psychic. Per imperial regulations, you hold the right to select 1 to 3 compatible partners within the next year. We already have a matching record on file. Yi Wuhan, Su Wanning cut in. Eldest heir of the Yi clan. The matching documentation was submitted already. Zhao Min checked her terminal. The record is here. Mr. Yi Wuhan's registered combat tier is C. The compatibility formula is valid. Do you confirm this match? I confirm. Zhao Min shot her a fleeting look and filled in the form. Matched partner, Yi Wuhan combat tier C, House Yi. Registration complete. Zhao Min closed her terminal. Miss Sue, the Bureau will contact you via your terminal regarding ongoing psychic supervision protocols. Understood, Su Wanning replied. Zhao Min stepped aside to make way. Qing stepped forward. She did not crowd Su Wanning aggressively like most reporters, stopping 2 paces away and offering a slight bow. Miss Sue, I'm Qing, a journalist with the Imperial Times. Might I trouble you for a few minutes of your time? Su Wanning lifted her gaze to meet the woman's eyes. This woman was no ordinary person. There was no urgent hunger for a scoop in her eyes. Instead, her gaze was calm, observing and assessing everything. Ask away, Su Wanning said. Qing activated her recording terminal. First, you were abandoned by the Su clan 18 years ago. Now they've sent men to bring you back. Would you agree to return? No, why not? Su Wanning stared straight into Qing's eyes and spoke slowly, one word at a time. I've lived here for 18 years. This is my home. The Su clan is nothing but a foreign place to me. I don't know them and they don't know me. Blood ties alone don't make a family. Qing's pen paused mid-stroke. She hadn't expected an 18-year-old girl raised on a junk planet to say something like that. Second, Qing continued, you mentioned you've accepted the matching with Mr. Yi Wuhan. Mr. Yi Wuhan only holds a C-tier combat power rank, which most people would consider mediocre talent. Why did you agree to match with him? Su Wanning's tone turned colder. Who said you can only match with people of high combat power? What I value isn't his strength, it's who he is. She paused. And he's no useless nobody. At the doorway of the room, Yi Wuhan's fingers tightened violently around the doorframe. He kept his head bowed, his long silver hair covering most of his face, hiding his expression. But Su Wanning noticed his shoulders trembling faintly. Qing glanced at Su Wanning, then at Yi Wuhan standing some distance away, and nodded. Third, Qing said, why is General Gu here? From what I know, General Gu's garrison lies at the edge of the Star Sector, a long way from GN 137. Su Wanning shot a glance at Gu Yuan. Gu Yuan spoke, his voice flat and unemotional. Official business. Qing held his gaze. Gu Yuan met her eyes in return. Their stares clashed in the air, and Qing was the first to look away. Her journalistic instinct told her there was far more behind those 2 words. But Gu Yuan was not someone she dared provoke. And neither was Su Wanning, whom she could not press with endless questions. One last question, Qing said. What plans does Miss Sue have for the future? Su Wanning thought for a moment. Stay on the junk planet, grow vegetables, restore my health, and live a quiet life. Qing blinked in surprise. Grow vegetables? Yes. Is there a problem with that? Qing held Su Wanning's gaze for several seconds. There was no trace of jest in those black eyes, nor any hint that she thought she was saying something remarkable. Only complete sincerity, she truly intended to farm vegetables. Qing closed her recording terminal. None at all. Thank you for granting this interview, Miss Sue. She bowed and stepped back. Steward Wang finally seized his chance. He stepped forward clutching a gift box, wearing a wide yet cautious, tentative smile. Second young lady, the master sent me to deliver this to you. He held out the box. Top-grade tonics and nutrient paste from the Core Star. The master said the clan wronged you deeply all those years ago, and he hopes you can find it in your heart to forgive them. The gates of the Su clan will always stand open for you. Su Wanning did not take the box. She stared at Steward Wang for several long seconds. Steward Wang. Speak, second young lady. 18 years ago, who made the call to send me to the junk planet? Steward Wang's smile froze on his face. That it was a decision from the clan elders' council. Was my father among the elders? Steward Wang hesitated. He was. Su Wanning nodded. Then in these 18 years, did he ever once ask whether I was alive or dead? Steward Wang opened his mouth but could not utter a single word. The gift box in his hands suddenly felt unbearably heavy. Su Wanning turned away without another glance at him and walked back into the house. Take the box back. Her voice drifted out from the doorway, soft yet crystal clear. Tell the Sioux clan I bear them no hatred, but I will never acknowledge them as my family. I'm alive and well, and they need not trouble themselves over me. The door clicked shut. Steward Wang stood rooted to the spot, clutching the box, his face flushing pale then ashen by turns. Qing watched the exchange and jotted a line down in her notebook. Zhao Min packed away her testing equipment, her peripheral vision flicking between Su Waning's retreating figure and Gu Yuan's face. Gu Yuan's gaze never left Su Waning until the door closed behind her, only then pulling away. That look, Zhao Min had worked for the Administration Bureau for 20 years and seen countless official matching cases. That gaze had nothing to do with official business. She scribbled a note in her logbook. Gu Yuan and Su Waning share an unusual bond. Recommend continued observation. The morning registration work drew to an end. Zhao Min and the other staff boarded their shuttle first. Before leaving, Qing snapped several photos of the house from a distance. Gu Yuan's soldiers moved to stop her, but she had already taken enough shots. Steward Wang lingered until the very last moment, hoping for a chance to speak to Su Waning alone, yet Gu Yuan never left the doorway, leaving him no opening. In the end, he climbed aboard the shuttle, still clutching the gift box. Inside the craft, Steward Wang opened his terminal and sent a message to Su Jinshan. Master, the second young lady refuses to return. Her aptitude test ranks S+, not SSS+. Moments later, Su Jinshan replied, S+ is sufficient. Keep close watch on her. Steward Wang shut down his terminal and let out a long, weary breath. Afternoon arrived. Everyone was gone. The shuttle lifted off and vanished over the horizon. The junk planet's sky faded back to its usual murky gray, as if nothing out of the ordinary had ever happened. Su Waning sat beside the stove, a cup of warm water set before her untouched. Lin Yi walked over and sat down beside her. Tired? He asked. Su Waning pondered. Weary at heart. I'll cook. Lin Yi stood up. No need, I'll do it in a minute. Su Waning caught hold of his sleeve. Sit with me a little longer first. Lin Yi sat back down. They sat side by side, watching the orange flames flicker inside the energy stove. Lin Yi. Do you think I went too far with what I said today? Which part? The bit about the Sioux clan. I bear them no hatred, but I will never acknowledge them. Lin Yi thought carefully. Did you mean every word? I did. Then you didn't go too far. His voice was gentle and soft. Waning, all these years, you've never spoken an ill word of the Sioux clan. Not because you held back anger, but because you thought it would make no difference. Today you spoke your truth because you finally have the confidence to stand your ground. This isn't excess, it's... You've grown up. A faint smile tugged at Su Waning's lips. You're only 4 years older than me. Don't talk like some stuffy old man. Lin Yi laughed. Yi Wuhan was in the partitioned room. He sat with his back against the wall, no book in hand, simply staring blankly at the ceiling. 3 candies rested clenched tight in his palm. And he's no useless nobody. Su Waning had spoken those words quietly, yet unshakably firm. It had not been pity, not consolation, not a patronizing line like, I won't shun you even if you're worthless. It was plain, unwavering certainty. He is not useless. Yi Wuhan lowered his head to stare at his own hands. His body ravaged by toxins, his combat power reduced to C tier, weaker than average ordinary folk. His stepmother called him trash. His father's eyes held nothing but disappointment whenever they fell on him. Every member of the Yi clan crossed the street to avoid him. He had long believed he truly was worthless. But Su Waning said otherwise. Yi Wuhan squeezed the candies tighter in his fist. He wondered, if one day he really could stop being a worthless nobody, would he ever deserve to stand by her side? Not as a mandated match, but by her own free will. Yi Wuhan closed his eyes. He believed he would. After all, she had taken quite a liking to his face. Dusk fell, and Gu Yuan returned from outside. Su Waning was cooking by the stove. She did not turn at the sound of footsteps. They've all left, she asked. Yes. The journalist too? Gone as well. Su Waning nodded and tossed the sliced vegetables into the pan. Oil sizzled and splattered everywhere. Gu Yuan stood behind her, watching her back. Vegetables stirred in hot oil released a fresh, pure aroma. Nothing like the synthetic chemical tang of nutrient paste, but the genuine scent of living plants. Gu Yuan, Su Waning called without turning her head. Thank you for today. For what? For standing behind me. She flipped the vegetables in the pan. With you there, they didn't dare act out of line. Gu Yuan fell silent for 2 beats. No thanks needed, he said. I will always stand behind you. Su Waning's stirring hand faltered for a split second. Then she smiled faintly, still not looking back at him. Understood. Go wash your hands. Dinner will be ready soon. Gu Yuan caught sight of the faint pink flush on the tips of her ears, and a tiny smile curved the corner of his mouth. All right. That night, the 4 of them gathered around the stove for dinner. The meal was far richer than usual. Su Waning had pulled out the last of her fresh vegetables from her spatial storage. She claimed she'd stockpiled them long ago. She stir-fried green leafy vegetables and simmered a turnip soup. It was paired with military rations Gu Yuan had brought, making for a proper, satisfying feast. Yi Wuhin took a sip of turnip soup, his violet eyes widening slightly. What is this? He asked. Turnip soup, Su Waning replied. What's a turnip? A type of vegetable. Yi Wuhin took another slow sip, savoring the flavor. It's sweet, he murmured. Turnips release a natural sweetness when simmered long enough. Yi Wuhin asked no more questions. He ducked his head and sipped the soup steadily, eating every scrap of turnip from his bowl. Su Waning watched him eat, a soft smile playing on her lips. Gu Yuan sipped his soup slowly, as though tasting something priceless and rare. Beside them, Lin Yi ate quietly, a constant gentle smile on his face. Su Waning woke to a silent summons from her vegetable plot. Her wood elemental ability sent clear, elated sensations through her mind. The green vegetables had grown thick leaves, the turnips swelled with reddened tops, and the tomatoes were blushing ripe. They were ready to harvest. She opened her eyes to find the sky still dark before dawn. Movement came from the stove, the orange glow of the energy stove silhouetting a tall figure. Gu Yuan was boiling medicinal herbs. He wore a black knit sweater with his sleeves rolled up to his forearms, holding the spoon she normally used as he closely monitored the simmering decoction. The angle of the spoon, the heat level, the order of the medicinal ingredients, every detail matched exactly how she prepared the medicine. Su Waning sat up, surprised. When did you learn to do this? Gu Yuan glanced back at her, his black eyes glowing with the stove fire's reflection. I watched you brew it several times. He'd mastered it just from watching a handful of times? Before Su Waning could ask further, Lin Yi pushed open the door carrying a basin of washed turnips. Dude dotted his clothes, his brown hair damp. He had clearly been up for ages. I've harvested the vegetables. Lin Yi set the basin down on the counter, his amber eyes crinkling with a warm smile. I picked only the tenderest leaves from the greens and selected the 2 largest turnips. Do they meet your standards? Su Waning glanced at the basin of spotlessly clean turnips, their fine root hairs neatly trimmed away. She then looked at the pile of pre-cut greens on the stove counter, whole leaves uniform in size. You finished everything, what am I supposed to do? Lin Yi smiled. Just sit and wait to eat. Gu Yuan poured the finished medicinal decoction into a bowl, carried it to Yi Wuhin's partition, and knocked twice on the door. He returned to the stove, picked up the spatula, and set about cooking. Su Waning watched Gu Yuan stir-fry. His movements were as precise as when he tilled soil, yet clearly unpracticed. He tilted the spatula at the wrong angle, sending several leafy greens nearly flying out of the pan. Still, he focused intently, his brows slightly furrowed as if executing a vital military mission. Lin Yi stepped forward and naturally took the spatula from his hands. Let me handle this. Go bring over the soup pot. Gu Yuan did not argue. He stepped half a pace back to yield the spot, yet did not wander far. He stood on the other side of the stove, dropped Lin Yi's sliced turnips into the soup. He adjusted the flame. The 2 stood side by side, one stir-frying greens, the other simmering soup. Neither spoke, yet they moved in perfect silent harmony. Su Waning leaned against the wall watching them, her heart filled with an indescribable warmth. They'd stolen all the chores from her, yet she felt not a trace of annoyance. Yi Wuhin emerged from his partition. He looked far healthier than he had the previous week, color returned to his cheeks, his long silver hair neatly tied back behind his head. He walked over to the stove, glanced at Lin Yi cooking and Gu Yuan tending the soup, and narrowed his violet eyes faintly. Then he stepped up to Su Waning. I finished all the medicine today, he said. Su Waning glanced at the empty bowl left outside his partition, faint medicinal residue coating the bottom. Good. How do you feel the medicine works? It's bearable. Yi Wuhin stared at her, pausing briefly. Did you teach Gu Yuan how to brew the herbs? He figured it out on his own. Yi Wuhin pressed his lips together. He turned and walked to the stove, standing between Lin Yi and Gu Yuan. What can I help with? He asked. Lin Yi shot him a glance. What can you do? Yi Woohin fell quiet for a moment. I can eat. Linny laughed, scooping a portion of freshly stir-fried greens onto a small clean plate and handing it to him. Taste it. Yi Woohin took the plate, but did not take a bite himself. He turned back to Su Wanning and held the plate out to her. Taste it, he echoed Lin Yi's exact words. Su Wanning stared at the vibrant green vegetables on the plate, then met Yi Woohin's violet gaze. Aren't you having any? You go first. Su Wanning picked up a chopstick full and took a bite, crisp, fresh, perfectly cooked to sweetness. It's delicious, she said. Yi Woohin watched her lips move, his Adam's apple bobbing, before he took the plate back and finished every last leaf. Dinner carried a subtle, unspoken tension. The four sat around the stove, dishes and soup set in the middle of them. As soon as Su Wanning lifted her chopsticks, 3 pairs of chopsticks reached for her bowl at once. Gu Yuan added a heap of green vegetables to her bowl. Lin Yi ladled a spoonful of turnip soup into her bowl. Yi Woohin slid a piece of pickled turnip to the edge of her bowl. The 3 portions landed almost simultaneously. Su Wanning stared down at her overflowing bowl, piled high with greens, soup, and pickled turnip. You 3, she looked up at them. Help yourselves to your own food, leave mine alone. Gu Yuan's expression remained impassive as he added another serving of greens to her bowl. Lin Yi smiled and filled half her bowl with extra soup. Yi Woohin slid the entire small dish of pickled turnips closer to her side. Su Wanning bit back a laugh and let it spill out. After the meal, Su Wanning stood to clear the bowls. I'll do it, Gu Yuan said, taking the dishes from her hands. I'll wash them, Lin Yi cut in, grabbing the bowls from Gu Yuan. I'll dry them, Yi Woohin added, taking the stack from Lin Yi and grabbing a cloth to wipe each piece clean. The 3 crowded around the wash basin, passing bowls between them in a seamless assembly line. Su Wanning stood empty-handed beside them, robbed of every task. Did you 3 plan this together? She asked. Gu Yuan shot her a wordless glance, passing the last bowl to Lin Yi, who washed it and handed it to Yi Woohin to dry and put away. Flawless coordination. Su Wanning leaned against the wall, watching the 3 men with a permanent soft smile on her face. In the afternoon, Su Wanning headed to the vegetable plot to check on her tomatoes. She had barely knelt down when footsteps sounded behind her. I'll handle this, Gu Yuan said. He squatted beside her and took the hoe from her grasp to loosen the soil. Su Wanning stood to pull weeds, only to find Lin Yi materializing behind her without her noticing. Let me, he said, dropping to his knees and plucking the weed she'd reached for. Su Wanning turned to grab the watering can to irrigate the crops, yet Yi Woohin stood directly in front of her, the can already in his hands. I've got it, he said, violet eyes locked on hers, before turning away to water the seedlings. Su Wanning stood motionless, hands empty. The entire plot's work had been divided among the 3 men. She watched Gu Yuan bent over tilling the soil, his military overcoat discarded to one side, wearing only a black button-up shirt with sleeves rolled to his forearms. Defined muscle lines shifted beneath his skin as he strained. She watched Lin Yi pluck weeds with gentle care, careful not to jostle the young sprouts, patting loose soil firm after each pull. She watched Yi Woohin carrying the watering can, at first pouring too forcefully and bending a green vegetable seedling. He dropped to his knees to straighten it at once, glancing back at her guiltily afterward. Su Wanning stood at the edge of the field gazing at the 3 of them, a warm, full feeling swelling inside her chest. Something soft and warm expanded within her, heavy yet light, threatening to spill over entirely. Dusk came, and Gu Yuan prepared to take his leave. He stood in the doorway, military overcoat fastened, the star insignia on his epaulettes glinting coldly in the fading twilight. Su Wanning walked him to the door. When will you come back next time? She asked. 3 days from now. Will you need to make up some excuse again? Gu Yuan met her eyes, a faint glimmer of amusement in his black pupils. No more excuses needed. Why not? I've filed a request to add GN 137 to my regular patrol route. He paused. I'll come every 3 days from now on. No pretense required. Su Wanning's heart skipped a beat. Got it. Be careful on the way. Gu Yuan nodded, not leaving right away. He reached out and tucked the stray strands of hair blown onto her face behind her ear. His fingertips brushed lightly, fleetingly against her ear. Then he turned and left. He took a few steps, paused, and looked back. The vegetables you grow taste amazing. He stared straight into her eyes. They're nothing like what I usually eat, and they're good for mental power too. With that, he walked away. After that day, Su Wanning's vegetable plot seemed touched by some kind of magic, not the magic of wood-type superpowers, but the magic of 3 men. Su Wanning didn't have to lift a finger anymore. She'd tried getting up early to tend the plot, only to find Gu Yuan already there. She'd tried rushing to cook before mealtime, yet Lin Yi would have chopped all the vegetables ahead of her. She'd snuck off to simmer medicinal herbs, and Yi Wuhen would stand by the stove, gazing at her with his violet eyes without a word. But his look spoke volumes. "Put that down, I'll handle it." Su Wanning set down the medicinal spoon, leaned against the wall, and watched Yi Wuhen skillfully toss herbs into the pot and adjust the heat. "You picked this up awfully fast," she said. Yi Wuhen didn't glance up. "You taught me well." Su Wanning studied his side profile, silvery long hair tied back, revealing a pale stretch of nape, his violet eyes fixed intently on the medicinal broth as if he were undertaking something of immense importance. After days of drinking the medicine, his health had improved drastically. Color returned to his cheeks, his lips no longer bore the purplish tint they'd had when he first arrived. His steps were steady, and his voice deeper when he spoke. This face was perfectly aligned with her taste. Lin Yi looked like a noble young master straight out of ancient costume dramas. Even raised on Junk Star, his innate refinement remained unshaken. Gu Yuan exuded the reliable, rugged charm of a military soldier, the kind of man you could trust with your life. Yi Wuhen's features, however, struck with unforgettable intensity, etched into one's memory at first glance. Yi Wuhen shifted uncomfortably. "Why do you keep staring at me?" "Just admiring you. You're such a pleasing sight to look at, it lifts my mood instantly," she said, heart fluttering softly. Yi Wuhen's face flushed crimson in an instant. "Shameless. How can a girl speak like that? I'm only looking at you, no one else. You're mine, I can stare all I want." Too embarrassed to retort, Yi Wuhen spun around and hurried outside. The vegetables in the plot were growing far too quickly. It was a problem Su Wanning hadn't anticipated. Her wood-type superpowers worked better than she'd hoped. Green leafy vegetables sprouted anew the moment one crop was harvested. 3 pulled radishes were immediately replaced by 3 fresh shoots. The first batch of tomatoes had ripened red, while the second was already blushing. The 4 of them could never eat it all, not even close. When she brought this up over dinner, all 3 men set down their chopsticks simultaneously. Gu Yuan spoke first. "Save them. I'll have more to eat when I come back next time." Yi Wuhen offered. "Make pickles. They'll keep longer." Lin Yi suggested. "Give some away." The 3 finished speaking at the exact same time, then turned their gazes to Su Wanning in unison. Su Wanning addressed Lin Yi first. "Give them to who?" Lin Yi fell silent for a moment. "Junk Star isn't just home to the 4 of us." Su Wanning blinked. She hadn't failed to consider this. Fragments of her original body's memories confirmed other survivors scattered across the planet. Around 20 to 30 in total, isolated in separate corners. Her predecessor had barely interacted with them, but Lin Yi knew them well. He'd spent 22 years surviving on Junk Star by scavenging scrap metal, crossing paths with every resident. She turned to Lin Yi. He nodded. "Old Chin to the east, Xiaodao's family to the west, Granny Mute up north. They're decent folk. Your vegetables are extraordinary, good for their bodies. They've endured this harsh star for far too long, their health all but ruined. I want to help them." Gu Yuan set down his chopsticks, dark eyes fixed on Su Wanning. Most people on Junk Star were abandoned by the Empire. No official identity, no access to supplies. Surviving solely on scrap. Your vegetables are invaluable to them. He paused. "Think carefully, once you start giving them out, it won't be a one-time favor." Su Wanning said nothing. She'd seen countless discarded souls in the apocalypse and knew Gu Yuan spoke the truth. Give once, and they'd come begging again. Refuse, and you'd be labeled cruel. But the apocalypse had taught her another vital lesson. Survival alone is not living. Hiding indoors while others starve outside is merely waiting for death. "We'll share a batch first," Su Wanning decided. "We'll see how things go." Gu Yuan watched her, an unreadable emotion swirling in his dark eyes. Not worry, not opposition, but something akin to profound respect. He nodded. "Very well. But I'm coming with you." "I'll go too," Yi Wuhen added. Lin Yi smiled. "I'll lead the way." That afternoon, Su Wanning filled her apron pocket with leafy greens and stowed 3 radishes, following Lin Yi eastward. "The 3 of you don't all have to tag along," she said. Gu Yuan said nothing, yet never slowed his pace. Yi Wuhen shot her a glance, also silent. Lin Yi smiled ahead of them. "The paths on Junk Star are treacherous. More people mean greater safety." Su Wanning scanned their surroundings, nothing but wrecked starship husks and metal fragments. Not a single living creature in sight. Where was the danger? Still, she held her tongue. She'd noticed Yu Wuhin walking to her right, shielding her from the wind. Junkstar's gales always blew from the east, carrying tiny metal shards that stung bare skin. He stood there, blocking most of the blast. She tilted her head to glance at him. Yu Wuhin stared straight ahead, his face impassive. Yet the tips of his ears burned bright red. After roughly 20 minutes of walking, Linny halted. A ramshackle hut built from discarded starship plating stood before them. It was far more dilapidated than their own dwelling. Its roof sagged, propped up by rusted iron pipes. And the door was a corroded metal sheet that failed to seal shut, revealing pitch-black darkness through the gaps. Piles of scrap metal as tall as a grown man, stacked beside the hut, likely collected slowly over years. "Old Chin?" Linny called into the hut. No reply. He raised his voice and called again. "Uncle Chin, it's me, Linny." A deep, racking cough echoed from within, as if torn from the very bottom of his chest, heavy enough to twist one's heart. Then came shuffling sounds, slow, labored movement as someone dragged themselves forward. The metal door creaked open from the inside. An elderly man poked his head out. He appeared 60 or 70, though age was impossible to judge accurately on Junkstar. Malnutrition, illness, and brutal conditions aged everyone far beyond their years. His hair was pure white, matted atop his head. His skin shriveled like dried orange peel, creases deep enough to trap small objects. His eyes were cloudy gray, veiled as if by fog. When he spotted Lin Yi, a faint glimmer flickered across his dull eyes. "Shaolin," his voice rasped, as if something lodged in his throat. "Haven't seen you in ages." "Uncle Chin, this is Wanning, the girl I told you about." Linny gestured to Su Wanning, then to Gu Yuan and Yu Wuhin. "These are her friends." Old Chen's gaze lingered on Su Wanning before falling to Gu Yuan, clad in a military overcoat with star rank insignia glinting faintly beneath the murky gray sky. The old man's expression shifted, not fear, not wariness, but a tangled, inexplicable look. As though he'd laid eyes on something that ought not exist here. Noticing this, Su Wanning stepped half a pace in front of Gu Yuan, blocking Old Chen's line of sight. "Uncle Chin," she pulled the bundle of greens and radishes from her apron. "I grew these myself, and we have far more than we can eat. I brought some for you." Old Chin stared at the lush green vegetables and ruddy radishes, his cloudy eyes blowing wide. He stretched out a hand, hesitated and pulled it back, then reached out again. Yearning to touch yet afraid to believe they were real. This, his lips trembled, voice shaking. "These are vegetables? Real vegetables?" "MHM, leafy greens and radishes," Su Wanning pressed them into his palms. "Freshly picked." Old Chin cradled the bundle, brushing his fingers gently over the leaves as if verifying their authenticity. His eyes grew misty, glistening with unshed tears. "Shaolin," he choked up, this is far too precious. "I can't accept it." "It's not a free handout," Su Wanning explained. She'd planned this beforehand. Charity given without expectation would never be cherished. "Keep an eye on the eastern path for us. If anyone heads toward our home, send word." Old Chin stared at her for several long seconds, then nodded vigorously. "I will. I'll watch closely." On the walk back from Old Chen's hut, Su Wanning remained quiet, lost in thought. The look on his face when he saw the vegetables was not simple joy or greed, but overwhelming disbelief, a sorrowful longing bordering on tears. As if he'd laid eyes on something that should never exist on this barren star. It reminded her of the survivors in her apocalypse base the first time they tasted crops she'd grown. Identical, exact replicas of that raw, desperate hope. "What are you thinking about?" Linny asked. Wondering how many more people like Uncle Chin live on Junkstar, Su Wanning replied. Linny mulled it over and listed several names. Xiaodao's family of 4 to the west, Granny Mute in the north, Old Zhao in the south, plus a handful of scattered stragglers. Fewer than 30 people in total. Junkstar spanned vast terrain, large enough to house tens of thousands. Yet barely 30 living souls lingered here. Su Wanning fell silent for a time. "Next time," she said, "we'll bring more vegetables." Linny smiled, offering no verbal confirmation, but nodded firmly. That evening, Su Wanning sorted the leftover vegetables beside the stove. Linny helped beside her. Gu Yuan had stepped outside to inspect the security alarms, while Yu Wuhin sat in the side compartment pretending to read an e-book. Su Wanning knew he was not absorbed in the pages. He flipped through them far too quickly, as if waiting for something. "We don't have much left," Linny said. "Half a crate of greens, 4 radishes." Su Wanning glanced at the produce, then toward the compartment, and made up her mind. Tomorrow, we'll head west. Lin Yi's hands stilled mid-motion. Xiaodao's place. Yes. They have young children who need the vegetables most. Lin Yi studied her for a long moment, warm amber eyes softening with tender light. All right. Gu Yuan pushed the door open, cold wind rushing in before he sealed it shut behind him. He brushed dust from his military coat and walked over to the stove, glancing at the remaining vegetables. Where are we off to tomorrow? He'd overheard their conversation outside. The western settlement, Su Wanning answered. Gu Yuan nodded. I'll come with you. Aren't you due back on your starship tomorrow? Gu Yuan paused for a second. I leave early the day after tomorrow. Good. Su Wanning's heart lifted at the knowledge he prioritized her safety above all else. Even in this advanced era, few men would set aside official duties to stay by her side. Inside the compartment, Yi Wuhan flipped another page of his e-book. He'd heard every word of their exchange. His finger hovered over the screen for a heartbeat before he resumed turning pages, yet a faint, tiny curve tugged at his lips. He caught the way Su Wanning glanced toward the compartment before announcing their trip west. She'd been waiting for him, waiting to bring him along. Yi Wuhan closed the e-book and set it aside, closing his eyes. That faint smile never fading from his mouth. Early the next morning, Su Wanning stirred awake to clattering sounds from the stove. It was not noise that roused her, but the warm aroma of cooking food. She opened her eyes to see Gu Yuan standing before the stove, wok spatula in hand, frying something. He wore a black knit sweater, sleeves rolled up to his forearms. His movements remained crisp and disciplined, yet smoother than the day prior. His wrist angled perfectly, no more flying vegetable scraps. Lin Yi stood beside him, dropping sliced radishes into a simmering soup pot. Yi Wuhan leaned against the wall, an empty medicinal bowl in his hands, having finished his dose. Su Wanning sat up, rubbing her eyes. You've stolen all my chores again. Lin Yi smiled. Go wash your face. Breakfast will be ready momentarily. Yi Wuhan carried his empty bowl over to set it on the stove, then pulled a candy from his pocket. He popped it into his mouth. He offered none to Su Wanning. She'd reminded him to ration their sweets. But shot her a glance, his violet eyes clearly conveying that he felt far stronger today. Su Wanning caught the unspoken message and curved her lips into a soft smile. After breakfast, the four set off westward together. Su Wanning clutched a small wicker basket brimming with greens and radishes. Double the amount she'd given Old Chin, knowing young children waited there. Gu Yuan walked to her left, Yi Wuhan to her right, and Lin Yi led the group at the front. They traveled a short distance before Su Wanning heard footsteps trailing behind them. She turned to spot Old Chin following far off. When their eyes met, the old man froze, shifting awkwardly like a child caught misbehaving. Uncle Chin. Su Wanning called out. Old Chin shuffled closer, clutching a bundle wrapped in frayed cloth. He held it out to her. And when she unfolded the fabric, polished, rust-free metal components glinted beneath the gray sky. They're for you, his voice remained rough. I scavenged them and scrubbed them clean. Shaolin fixes machinery. He'll find them useful. Su Wanning stared at the spare parts, then back at Old Chin. His clothes hung tattered and threadbare, his shoes cobbled together from discarded starship inner tubing. His frame gaunt as dry firewood. Yet here he stood, offering the most valuable possessions he owned as a gift. A sharp ache pricked her nose. She did not refuse. She took the cloth bundle and nodded. Thank you, Uncle Chin. Old Chin smiled, revealing a sparse set of yellowed teeth. The smile was unrefined, yet utterly genuine. Su Wanning passed the bundle of parts to Lin Yi and continued forward. After a few steps, she paused to glance back. Old Chin still stood rooted to the spot, watching their retreating figures, his hunched back bent like a wind-twisted tree. She turned and quickened her pace. Xiao Dao's dwelling lay farther than Old Chen's hut, a 40-minute walk in total. It was built from discarded shipping containers, slightly larger than their own home, yet even more decrepit. A massive hole gaped in the container's side, patched with plastic sheeting that flapped and rattled in the wind. A woman sat by the entrance, an infant cradled in her arms, two more small children squatting beside her. The woman appeared to be in her early 30s, yet deep wrinkles crinkled her eyes, her skin rough as sandpaper. The baby in her arms was tiny, less than a year old, its ribs plainly visible beneath thin skin. The two older children, a boy and a girl around 5 or 6, were all skin and bones, yet their eyes shone bright. Lin Yi stepped forward and knelt, smiling gently at the little girl. Xiaoya, do you remember me? The girl stared at him for a moment, then nodded softly. Uncle Lin. Lin Yi ruffled her hair, then stood and turned to Su Wanning. This is Xiao Dao's home. Xiao Dao's out scavenging supplies. This is his wife. Su Wanning knelt down and emptied the greens and radishes from her basket onto the ground before the woman. The woman stared at the vegetables, stunned. The infant in her arms stirred, tiny hands reaching out to grasp at the fresh produce. Are these? Her voice barely carried, as if she feared speaking too loud would make the sight vanish. Vegetables, Su Wanning said. I grew them myself, for the children. Tears instantly flooded the woman's eyes. She parted her lips to speak, yet no words came out. She looked down at the baby in her arms, then the two emaciated children beside her, and hot tears spilled down her cheeks. Su Wanning said nothing. She stood and emptied every last vegetable from the basket, setting them all before the woman. Once these run out, come find me, she told her. Cross the trash mountain to the east. There's a house built from starship hatch panels. You won't miss it. The woman lifted her tear-streaked face, gazing at Su Wanning and nodding hard. The walk home passed in silence. Gu Yuan walked on her left, blocking most of the harsh wind. Yi Wuhan stayed to her right, testing each unstable patch of ground with his feet first, stamping it firm before letting her step across. Lin Yi led the way at a slower pace than before, sensing Su Wanning's weariness. The four traveled the 40-minute stretch without exchanging a single word. Upon reaching their dwelling, Su Wanning lingered by the door, hesitant to step inside at once. Junkstar's sky remained murky gray, the wind still sharp with metallic grit. Yet for the first time, the place no longer felt bitterly cold. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The energy stove still glowed, the soup in the pot warm. Lin Yi headed to reheat the broth. Gu Yuan went to check the security alarms. And Yi Wuhan retreated to the side compartment with his e-book. Everything was just as it had always been. Yet, something was different. Su Wanning knew that out east and west on this junk planet, people were waiting for her. Not waiting for her to save them. She'd saved enough people throughout the end times. They were waiting for her to bring them vegetables. That was more than enough. One afternoon, Su Wanning was setting up trellises for her tomato plants in the vegetable plot, with Yi Wuhan standing beside her to help. Gu Yuan was away today. 3 days prior, as he left, he'd said he wouldn't return for 5 days due to routine border drills. Su Wanning had acknowledged his words, but he lingered by the door instead of leaving at once. After standing there a moment, he reached out and brushed a leaf off her hair, then departed. Su Wanning touched the top of her head, the spot where he'd removed the leaf still tingled faintly. Lin Yi was inside repairing machinery. Wind from the junk planet slipped through the crack beneath the door, rattling the spare parts spread across his work table. Every few moments, he glanced toward the doorway. Not to watch the door itself, but to gaze out at the garden, at Su Wanning's crouched figure in the soil. It was Su Wanning, not Yi Wuhan or Lin Yi, who spotted the spacecraft first. The sky over the junk planet was perpetually a murky gray, but now a silvery pinpoint of light had appeared within that haze. The dot grew larger as it descended, the roar of its engines echoing from afar. It lacked the deep, steady hum of military starships. Instead, the sound was shrill, almost boastful. Yi Wuhan heard it too. He stood, his violet eyes fixed on the light, his expression turning icy in an instant. Cold the way it had been the day he first arrived on this trash world, an empty chill that let nothing in. That's not Gu Yuan, he said. I know, Su Wanning replied, straightening up and tucking a strip of cloth into her pocket. The spacecraft touched down on the empty stretch of ground before the house. It did not land cautiously, far off as the last ship had. This one barreled straight to the entrance. Its landing gear slammed into the ground, clattering loose scraps of metal and sending clouds of dust and metallic grit billowing toward them. Su Wanning squinted, and Yi Wuhan instinctively stepped in front of her. He shielded her from the flying debris with his back. Lin Yi emerged from the house, a wrench still clutched in his hand. He halted in the doorway, neither advancing nor retreating. The hatch slid open. 2 bodyguards stepped out first. They were tall, rigid figures in black uniforms and sunglasses. Their posture was stiff, not the disciplined bearing of soldiers, but the artificial, intimidating poise of hired enforcers. They flanked the hatch, and a third figure descended. A woman. She appeared to be in her early 30s, clad in a form-fitting deep crimson dress that fell just to her knees, revealing pale calves. On her feet were thin black stiletto heels that sank into the loose refuse with every step, making her walk with visible difficulty, yet her face betrayed no discomfort. Or rather, she refused to let any show. Her hair was piled high and secured with a dark red hairpin, exposing a slender neck and a pair of large jade earrings that swayed as she moved, catching the dull gray light of the planet. Her features were polished to an unnatural perfection, over thinly drawn brows, overly crimson lips, foundation caked so thick it resembled a mask. Her eyes were bright, yet the glow did not emanate from within. It looked like light cast artificially upon her. Su Wanning did not recognize her, but Yi Wuhin did. One of the Su family, Yi Wuhin murmured so softly only Su Wanning could hear. Su Qinghe. Your father's younger sister. By blood, you ought to call her aunt. Su Qinghe stopped 3 paces away from Su Wanning. She raked her gaze over Su Wanning from head to toe. Su Wanning had seen that look before, many times. The Su household steward Wang Zhang had stared at her the exact same way, as if appraising an object with no clear price tag. At the very least, Wang Zhang had pretended to hide his disdain. Su Qinghe made no such effort. Her eyes traveled from Su Wanning's hair to her face, then her clothes. Finally, she lingered on her footwear. Su Wanning wore crude sandals Lin Yi had fashioned from discarded tires, their treaded rubber soles held together by 2 frayed fabric straps. Ugly, yet utterly distinctive. Su Qinghe pulled her gaze away from the shoes, her mouth twitching. It was not a smile, merely a restrained grimace of polite revulsion at something unsightly. You must be Su Wanning, she said. Her voice was pleasant, crisp, and well enunciated like a broadcaster's, yet utterly devoid of warmth. Su Wanning met her stare. Who are you? Su Qinghe's brows lifted, clearly unprepared for such a blunt response. I am your father's sister, Su Qinghe, she stated. By seniority, you will address me as aunt. Su Wanning said nothing. Su Qinghe waited 1 second, 2, 3. Wind swept between them, flaring the hem of her crimson dress. She smoothed it down with a graceful, rehearsed gesture. Aren't you going to invite me inside? She asked, glancing past Su Wanning at the ramshackle house behind her, her gaze lingering on the makeshift door forged from a scrapped starship hatch. Su Wanning did not move. Speak your business here. Su Qinghe studied her again, this time for far longer. Long enough for Su Wanning to spot fine wrinkles at the corners of her eyes, lines her heavy foundation could not conceal. She had maintained rigid facial composure, yet those creases betrayed her simmering irritation, even anger. Very well, Su Qinghe said. I will be direct. The Su family summons you home. Su Wanning held her tongue, waiting for her to continue. The household learned of your refusal to see Wang Zhang last time, Su Qinghe spoke, as if negotiating a transaction. The kind laced with the resentment of someone who believed they had already conceded far more than they ought. Grandfather, your paternal grandfather, is furious. But he has decreed that regardless of everything, you are a Su. You cannot disgrace the family by lingering out here. At the phrase, disgrace the family, Su Wanning's lips tugged faintly upward. Su Qinghe noticed, yet ignored the reaction and pressed on. A courtyard residence has been prepared for you in the finest district of the capital planet. Steps from the Psychic Ability Association and a 5-minute walk to the Administrative Bureau. Your designated match from the Yi family may return with you. Lodging has been set aside for him as well. Name any other conditions you may have, and they will be met. Su Wanning watched her, waited for her to finish, then paused several heartbeats to confirm she had nothing more to say. I made myself perfectly clear last time. Su Qinghe's expression shifted. The patient, bargaining glint faded slowly from her eyes, sinking into a cold, hard bitterness beneath. Su Wanning, you are young and foolish, and I shall not hold it against you. Her voice retained its melodic tone. Yet every word carried a sharpened edge, like an unsharpened blade. Blunt, yet capable of drawing blood with enough force. But think carefully. This is a junk planet. Look at where you live, the clothes you wear, those tires strapped to your feet. She glanced down at the rubber sandals, trailing off, but the involuntary twitch of her mouth spoke volumes. The Su household holds the rank of Marquis. Return with us, and you will be the Marquis's young lady. You will have the finest food, clothing, and amenities imaginable. Your S+ psychic aptitude will grant you access to the galaxy's top tutors to aid your breakthrough to SS rank. As for your marriage match, Yi Wuhin, as you well know, possesses only C-grade physical prowess. And there is no guarantee his strength will ever recover. Within the Su household, you could be paired with a far superior candidate. Behind Su Wanning, Yi Wuhin's fingers tightened into fists at those words. She shifted half a step to her right, a subtle, natural movement as if merely shifting her weight. But that small movement blocked his clenched hands entirely from Su Qinghe's sight. Su Qinghe missed the small gesture, her attention fixed firmly on Su Waning's face, calm, unmoved, utterly impassive as she stared back. What do you possibly stand to gain from all this? Su Qinghe finally snapped. Unable to contain her frustration, she gestured toward Yi Wuhan and Lin Yi behind Su Waning. This pile of scrap metal? Trash? Them? She pointed at the dilapidated house in the distance, her gaze heavy with unmasked revulsion. Not mere contempt, but deep, instinctive disgust for filth. Su Waning held her gaze for several seconds. Have you finished? Su Qinghe pressed her lips thin. Leave if you have nothing more to say, Su Waning said quietly, every syllable clear and unwavering. I want none of what you offered, the courtyard, the tutors, the arranged match. I am content living on this junk planet. I have no desire to return and play the marquise young lady. For the first time, a readable emotion crossed Su Qinghe's face, not anger, which she hid masterfully, but utter disbelief, the kind reserved for someone who has lost their senses. Do you understand what you are saying? Her polished tone shattered, rising to a shrill pitch, as if that dull blade had suddenly been whetted sharp. You claim to be content, living like this on a garbage world? Wearing rags such as... She flicked another glance over Su Waning's attire, deigning not to finish the sentence, her gaze alone conveying her judgment. Do you grasp the standing of the Su household? Return home, and every citizen of the empire will know your name, Su Waning. Your face will grace the Imperial Gazette. You will attend royal galas, draped in the most luxurious gowns and feasting on the finest delicacies. She cut herself off mid-sentence, her gaze drifting past Su Waning to the vegetable plot behind her. Beneath the planet's gray haze, the crops bloomed an impossibly vivid green. Su Qinghe stared at that lush foliage for a heartbeat, then pulled her eyes back to Su Waning. She waited several seconds for a reply, received none, and drew a deep breath. Her chest rose beneath the crimson dress, and her jade earring swayed. Very well, she said. I will not force you today. But your father wishes to see you. He will arrive here in 3 days' time. A flicker of emotion crossed Su Waning's features at last, not fear, not anxiety, but weary resignation, the weight of yet another unwanted confrontation bearing down on her. It makes no difference whether he comes or not. Su Qinghe stared at her for a long stretch of time. You will come back with us, she stated flatly. She turned on her heel, her stilettos clicking sharply against the scrap metal, sinking into the refuse with every step. Her gait lost all grace, heavy with suppressed rage. The 2 bodyguards followed close behind. The hatch sealed shut and the spacecraft lifted off. Its engine roar shrank from a shrill whine to a low rumble before fading entirely, leaving the sky its usual dull gray. Su Waning stood rooted to the spot, watching the ship vanish into the distance, silent. Yi Wuhan stood behind her, also without a word. Everything Su Qinghe said, Yi Wuhan spoke at last, his voice low. The courtyard, the tutors, the arranged matches. Su Waning cut him off. I don't need any of it. I can live perfectly well without the Su family. Yi Wuhan fell silent, his fingers curling lightly into the dirt before releasing it. He pulled a candy from his pocket, unwrapped it, and popped it into his mouth. Sweet. Su Waning glanced at him, a faint smile tugging her lips. She set a water cup beside him and stood to check her radishes. Yi Wuhan stared at the cup beside him, picked it up, and took a sip. It was warm. That evening, Su Waning brewed medicinal herbs herself. Yi Wuhan had been lost in thought all afternoon, not blankly staring into space, but deep in contemplation. His violet eyes fixed on a single point, pupils unfocused, his fingers tapping absently against his knees. When she said she would handle the medicine, he simply nodded. Lin Yi sat in the side chamber, a spare part in his hands and tools laid out beside him, yet he made no move to work. He listened to every sound drifting in from outside. Su Waning finished simmering the medicine, poured it into a bowl, and carried it in. Yi Wuhan took the bowl, but did not drink immediately, staring down at the dark brown decoction. He suddenly asked, "What will you do when your father arrives?" Su Waning sat cross-legged across from him, hands resting lightly on her knees. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it." "What if he forces you to leave with him?" Su Waning thought it over. "He won't succeed." "How can you be certain?" "He cannot take me away. Interstellar psychic abilities are used mostly for calm and soothing. But mine were honed for combat, not to mention my wood elemental powers." He bowed his head and drained the entire bowl in one gulp. "It's bitter," he muttered. "I left out licorice root today," Su Waning explained. Your mind is restless. Bitter medicine will clear your head. Yi Wuhin handed the bowl back to her, his fingertips brushing hers. Neither pulled away. Their skin touched for a fleeting moment before Su Wanning took the bowl and rose to her feet. Yi Wuhin mumbled glumly, "You know I'm upset, and you don't even comfort me." "Get some rest," she said. "Your health has improved greatly these past days. A few more rounds of this medicine, and all the poison in your system will be purged. Once the toxin is gone, your strength will recover gradually. What is there for you to worry about?" With that, Su Wanning turned and walked out of the chamber. Yi Wuhin leaned back against the wall, watching her retreating figure. He slipped a hand into his pocket and counted the candies stored there, 5 in total. He had not eaten any that day, saving them all. He pulled one candy out, stared at it, then tucked it back. He would save it for tomorrow. Su Wanning washed the dishes and stepped outside to linger by the door. The night wind of the junk planet carried a cool bite, not the bitter cold of winter, but a mild spring chill tinged with faint warmth. She stood there for ages, gazing at the murky gray sky, picturing Su Jinshan descending from it in 3 days' time. She did not fear him, but she was tired. Not physical exhaustion, but the crushing weariness of finally carving out a peaceful life, only for others to tear it apart. Footsteps sounded behind her. Lin Yi walked over to stand beside her and draped his coat over her shoulders. The jacket carried his scent, not perfume, but a unique blend of metallic dust from the planet and sun-warmed fabric. "It's cold out here," he said. Su Wanning drew the coat tighter around herself. Lin Yi. "Yes. When Su Jinshan comes, stay inside. Don't come out." Lin Yi fell quiet for a beat. "Why? You belong to me. I won't give the Su family any chance to mistreat you." Lin Yi neither agreed nor refused. He stood beside her, staring up at the gray sky alongside her. After a moment, he spoke. "I will stay by your side. I am not afraid. No matter what happens, we will face it together." Su Wanning tilted her head to look at him. Lin Yi's gaze remained fixed on the sky, his soft, unguarded side profile illuminated by faint starlight. He rarely spoke in such a tone, not a request or a suggestion, but a firm statement of unshakable resolve. Su Wanning said nothing more. She turned back to the sky, wrapped in the warm coat, cozier than the energy heater inside. The next morning, when Su Wanning woke, medicinal herbs were already simmering gently on the stove, kept warm. Soup steamed in a pot, bowls and chopsticks were neatly set out, and a cup of lukewarm water waited on the counter. She sat up and rubbed her eyes, spotting a new object by the entrance of the side chamber. A chair. It was small, even plain and unattractive, its metal frame exposed, the fabric seat faded from countless washes. Yet the cushion was thick, the backrest curved perfectly to support the spine, and its surfaces were smooth, free of sharp edges that might cut skin. Su Wanning ran a hand over the cushion. The aged cloth was surprisingly soft. She traced the worn spot on the armrest, sandpapered smooth countless times. No rough splinters were left, only a gentle polish worn into the metal from years of touch. Lin Yi walked over from the stove, a spoon in his hand and an apron tied around his waist. He paused when he saw her kneeling before the chair, running her fingers over the armrest. "You made this?" Su Wanning looked up at him. "MHM," Lin Yi replied, watching her. "I tested it. It should sit comfortably." Su Wanning lowered herself onto the chair. The height was perfect, neither too tall nor too short. The back cradled her waist, the armrests propped her elbows, and the cushion held a balanced softness. She leaned back, and the chair did not shift an inch. "It's so comfortable," she said. A smile spread across Lin Yi's face, his amber eyes lighting up with pure, unselfish joy. Not pride, but simple happiness drawn purely from seeing her at ease. "From now on when we plant vegetables, you just sit aside and watch," he said. Su Wanning stared at him, at the grease stains smearing his apron, the raw red marks on his fingers rubbed raw by screwdrivers, and the faint dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep. How long had he been working? The night before, she'd fallen asleep to find him hunched by the stove. And she'd thought he was just repairing spare parts. She parted her lips, wanting to say thank you, yet the words felt far too trivial. "Lin Yi. It's so good to have you." Lin Yi's fingers tightened briefly around his apron before loosening again. His gentle, reassuring smile never faded, but Su Wanning spotted the tips of his ears flushing bright red. "I'll go ladle the soup," he said, turning to leave. Su Wanning sank into the chair, gazing at his retreating back. The seat was sturdy, its cushion soft, and she traced the worn, polished grooves on the armrest over and over. Gu Yuan returned at dusk on the 5th day. The chair was wonderfully comfortable. After pinching off all the side shoots along a row of tomato vines, Su Wanning leaned back, and the wood let out a faint creak. Yi Wuhan glanced up at her, his violet eyes questioning whether she was tired. Su Wanning shook her head, and he lowered his gaze once more to drive bamboo stakes into the soil. Footsteps echoed from the east. Su Wanning recognized that stride at once. She lifted her head and watched him round the bend of the trash mountain. In one hand he carried a large bulging canvas sack. Su Wanning stood up, pruning shears still clutched in her palm. Yi Wuhan rose too, his violet eyes fixed on Gu Yuan. No open hostility yet no warmth either, merely a quiet acknowledgement of his arrival. "You're back?" Su Wanning asked. Gu Yuan walked over, set the sack down beside the vegetable plot, and knelt to inspect the tomato trellises, then the wooden chair. "Newly built." "Linny made it," Su Wanning replied. "You can sit while tending the crops, it takes the strain off your legs." Gu Yuan said nothing. He reached out to brush the chair's armrest, lingering a second over its smooth, worn surface before pulling his hand away and standing upright. "I brought supplies." He unzipped the sack and pulled out items one by one, a thick gray blanket, folded neatly. 2 brand new sets of women's clothing with soft fabric, price tags still attached. Several bottles of premium nutrient fluid infused with mental energy recovery agents, far more costly than basic or flavored varieties, and a small vacuum-sealed pack of dried meat stamped with the silhouette of an unknown stellar beast. Su Wanning's eyes lit up at the sight of the dried meat. Gu Yuan noticed instantly. He separated the pack and pressed it into her hands. "Stellar beast meat. You mentioned stewing it with potatoes last time. This must be incredibly expensive." Gu Yuan ignored the question and handed her the blanket and clothes as well. "Wrap yourself in the blanket at night. Try on the garments. If they don't fit, I'll exchange them next trip." Su Wanning stood cradling the pile of goods for a moment. "You brought so much. Won't the crew on your starship say something?" "No one dares." She stole a glance at him. His expression remained hard and unyielding, no hint of jest. She bit her lip to stifle a smile and carried everything inside the hut. Yi Wuhan lingered in the vegetable patch. Gu Yuan turned toward him and pulled one last item from the sack, a palm-sized metal box embossed with the Yi family crest. "Uncle Han sent this for you," Gu Yuan stated. Yi Wuhan took the box without opening it, his violet gaze locked on Gu Yuan. "You met Uncle Han?" "He sought me out," Gu Yuan said. "He told me to tell you to come to him if you need anything." Yi Wuhan's fingers tightened around the metal casing, then relaxed. "I understand." Gu Yuan eyed him. "Close to A+ rank now?" Should hit S by next week." Gu Yuan nodded, falling silent. He turned to stare at the door Su Wanning had vanished through, standing motionless for a long while. "That chair," he spoke abruptly. "Did she ask you to build it?" Yi Wuhan paused, then realized Gu Yuan was referring not to himself, but Lin Yi. "He made it of his own accord," Yi Wuhan answered. "The night Su Qinghe visited, he worked straight through till dawn." Gu Yuan's lips pressed into a thin line. Yi Wuhan watched his tight jaw and said no more. He clutched the metal box and headed indoors, pausing as he passed Gu Yuan. "She said something," Yi Wuhan's voice dropped to a murmur. "Said Su Wanning lives a pitiful life on this junk planet, wearing shoes cobbled from scrap tires, squatting in mud to grow vegetables. Claimed the Su Manor could offer her a far better life." Gu Yuan did not utter a word. Yi Wuhan left. The 3 of them had turned this barren wasteland into fertile farmland, yet they could never erase the truth that this was still a trash planet. Shoes carved from old tires. Su Wanning wore those tire sandals Lin Yi had crafted from discarded rubber. She'd never once complained about them. She gardened, walked miles, delivered vegetables to old Chin and Xiaodao's family in them, and seemed perfectly content. When she knelt among the crops, the tread patterns of the tires peeked out from the soles. "Do I look all right?" Su Wanning asked, modeling the new clothes Gu Yuan had brought. Lin Yi was heating soup over the stove and twisted to glance at her, his amber eyes brightening. "You look beautiful," he said, then added softly, "Everything suits you." Su Wanning laughed and tugged at the sleeves, which hung half an inch too long, covering her fingertips. "They're a little big." Gu Yuan explained, "It's my first time buying women's clothing, so the fit's off. I'll get you better ones next time." After weeks of steady nourishment, Su Wanning had filled out around her face and frame, her hair no longer dry and brittle. Dressed in the new attire, she looked radiant. That night, the 4 gathered around the stove for dinner. An extra dish sat on the table, The stellar beast meat Gu Yuan had brought. Unable to bear finishing it all at once, Su Wanning had sliced a quarter portion and stewed it with turnips. The meat remained tough even after hours of simmering, yet it released a rich, savory aroma. It was the long-forgotten true taste of meat. It was Yi Wuhan's first time eating meat. He chewed slowly for ages before swallowing, his violet eyes swirling with an unnameable mix of shock and quiet emotion. "This is meat," he asked. "Stellar beast meat," Su Wanning replied. "Is it good?" Yi Wuhan did not answer, only reached for another chunk, his silence speaking volumes. Gu Yuan ate at a slow pace, chewing every mouthful thoroughly. Su Wanning noticed he spoke far less than usual. Normally, he would offer short replies like, and then, all right, or understood, but tonight he said nothing at all. His gaze wandered endlessly across the small hut, the cracks spiderwebbing the walls, the medicinal pot simmering on the stove, the wooden chair Linny had built, and the tire sandals on Su Wanning's feet. She noticed, yet asked no questions. After dinner, Linny washed the dishes while Yi Wuhan retreated to his partitioned cubicle. Su Wanning held a mug of warm water and stood in the doorway gazing up at the sky. Gu Yuan stepped outside to stand beside her, a fist's width separating their bodies. "You're awfully quiet tonight." Su Wanning tilted her head to look at him. Gu Yuan fell silent for a long moment. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice low, "how many decent meals you've had since arriving on this junk planet." Su Wanning blinked in confusion. "What do you mean?" "You plant crops, cook every meal, brew medicinal tonics. You care for Yi Wuhan, look after Lin Yi, take care of me." Gu Yuan's gaze drifted down to the mug in her hands, the tire sandals on her feet, and the slender fingers peeking out from her cuffs. "No one looks after you." Su Wanning opened her mouth to protest, but Gu Yuan continued before she could speak. "Lin Yi built you a chair. Yi Wuhan's learning to prepare herbal medicine. As for me," he paused. "Every time I visit, I only bring basic supplies, nutrient fluid, rations, construction materials. I've never brought you a single proper set of clothes, never a decent pair of shoes. I don't even know your shoe size." Su Wanning glanced down at her tire sandals. Two frayed fabric straps formed the uppers, the treaded rubber sole smooth and comfortable thanks to Lin Yi's careful handiwork, though undeniably ugly. "Your shoes," Gu Yuan's tone softened to a whisper, "are made from scrap tires. I never noticed before. You noticed them just now. I'm only seeing them properly now. It's not too late." Gu Yuan stared at her, his black eyes filled with a raw tenderness she'd never seen in him before. It was pure heartache. "I wasn't here the day Su Qinghe came," he said. "You were stationed at the sector border for military drills." "I could have turned the drills down," Gu Yuan said flatly. "I chose not to." Su Wanning waited silently for him to finish. "You spend every day squatting in the vegetable fields, wearing tire-soled shoes, never enough to eat, never warm enough clothes. The Gu Manor is a ducal household, and I hold the rank of executive officer. Yet all I've given you," he glanced toward the stove, the wooden chair, the cubicle in the back, "pales in comparison to what Linny provides." "Gu Yuan," Su Wanning cut him off gently, "you've given me more than anyone else." Gu Yuan fixed his eyes on her. "The supplies you bring are essential basics, the very things we lack most," she said softly. "I can sew my own clothes and shoes, and well, I can't grow meat. You know what I mean." Gu Yuan remained quiet. Besides, Su Wanning brushed the fabric of her dark blue coat. "This garment is lovely. Even if it's half an inch too big, I can wear it for years." Gu Yuan stretched out a hand and wrapped his fingers around the slender wrist exposed by her loose cuff. He did not speak, nor make any other movement. Only held her fingertips, the thin, dirt and plant-stained digits peeking out from the dark blue sleeve. Su Wanning did not pull away. Fine grit swirled across the ground. "Next time," Gu Yuan's voice came rough, "I'll bring shoes. You can pick them out yourself." "All right." "And more clothes." "All right." "And tender stellar beast meat, no tough cuts." Su Wanning's lips curved into a faint smile. "All right." Gu Yuan stood there holding her hand for a very long time. Night fell deep. Lin Yi and Yi Wuhan had both retreated to their separate cubicles. Su Wanning heard the soft rustle of fabric as their makeshift cloth curtain doors slid shut. The hut fell quiet, the energy stove's light dimmed to its lowest setting, leaving only a faint orange glow flickering above the cooking range. Su Wanning sat in the wooden chair, the one Linny had built, the one Gu Yuan had touched, the seat she occupied every day while gardening. She dragged it inside beside the stove, positioned to face the doorway directly. Gu Yuan leaned against the doorframe, facing her. He had not left yet. By protocol, he ought to return to his starship tonight, Post-drill briefings, routine military communications, and stacks of overdue reports waited for him. But he stayed. His starship orbited the junk planet, his adjutant sending a comms alert every hour, which he read and ignored. Su Wanning cradled a mug of warm water Lin Yi had boiled before bed, kept lukewarm on the energy stove. She sipped slowly, holding the mug between her palms as she watched Gu Yuan in the doorway. "When will you head back?" she asked. "Shortly," Gu Yuan replied. He drank in the sight of her, clad in the pale gray loungewear he'd brought, the neckline slipping low to reveal a sliver of her collarbone. Her hair fell loose over her shoulders with soft natural waves at the ends, gilded amber by the stove's faint orange light. A heavy weight settled in his chest, not pain, but an aching, swelling longing to draw near, yet holding himself back. "Su Wanning," he spoke at last. I want to file a matching application for us right now." Su Wanning's hand jolted, sloshing warm water from the mug onto her wrist. "Now," she repeated, stunned. "Now," Gu Yuan affirmed. "Your father arrives tomorrow. If our matching application is officially filed, he has no authority to take you away. Article 47 of Imperial Military Law, the personal freedom of mentally attuned partners with filed matching status falls under military protection. No clan may forcibly recall them." Su Wanning studied him. "You've memorized that perfectly." "I've read it countless times," Gu Yuan said. "Ever since I met you." Su Wanning lowered her gaze to the rippling surface of the water in her mug, the stove's orange glow dancing across it. "But once we submit the application," she murmured, "everyone will know. The Mental Energy Administration, the Su Manor, the entire empire. An SSS-ranked executive officer matched to an S+ woman from a junk planet. I am aware. They'll grow suspicious." Su Wanning lifted her head to meet his eyes. "Your SSS rank paired with an S+ match. Military physicians know how severe your mental energy surges are, and the Su family can access those records too. Will an S+ mental energy user truly stabilize an SSS rank surge? They'll question my actual rank." Gu Yuan fell silent for several seconds. "So what?" he said simply. Su Wanning blinked. "So what?" "So they will suspect," Gu Yuan said flatly, his tone unwavering, as though he dissected every possible outcome and resolved to disregard the consequences. "They'll investigate you, monitor you, cast doubt on your mental energy tier. But all of that is far preferable to your father dragging you back to the Su Manor." He crossed the hut and knelt down before her, bringing their eyes level. His hand rested on the chair's armrest, his fingertips brushing her forearm where it lay atop the wood, and he did not pull away. "You don't want to return to the Su Manor," Gu Yuan said, "and I refuse to let you go. You're happy here, planting vegetables, cooking, caring for Yu Wuhan, delivering produce to Old Chin and the others. You would never find that happiness in the Su household." Su Wanning stared into his black eyes, clear and unwavering, no trace of hesitation. "If I refuse to leave, he can't force me. You don't have to file the matching application. I don't know what plans you have to stop him, but he will keep coming, resort to any means to take you back. Once our matching is official, he will have no recourse at all. If we match," she locked eyes with him, weighing her words, "you'll be bound to take responsibility for me." "I know. Not just the responsibility of guarding my safety," Su Wanning struggled to articulate the thought. It's more like she'd survived 10 years through the apocalypse, never forming a bond like this with anyone. Back in the survivor base, others relied on her supernatural abilities, and she relied on their manpower. A transaction, not devotion. True responsibility meant standing by someone even when they no longer needed you. "It means I'll be there whenever you need me," Gu Yuan finished for her. A sharp twinge of warmth stung the back of Su Wanning's throat. "You're an SSS-ranked executive officer. Tying yourself to a simple vegetable farmer from a trash planet. Won't you lose everything?" Gu Yuan looked at her, the corner of his mouth twitching, not a smile, but a quiet, baffled fondness. As if wondering how she could ask such a thing. "I was dying from unregulated mental energy surges until you found me," he said. "You gave me soup, calmed my surges, and granted me months more of life. What exactly do I stand to lose?" Su Wanning said nothing. Gu Yuan slowly lifted his hand from the armrest, moving deliberately to give her every chance to pull away, and covered her hands resting on her lap. His palms burned warm against her skin, knuckles defined and fingers long, completely enveloping her smaller hands. "I'm filing the matching application," he said. "Not merely because I need your mental stabilization. I want the right to stand openly beside you and shield you. When the Su family came, you stood alone in the doorway. Yu Wuhan and Lin Yi tried to protect you, yet they lacked the power to hold back a marquee household. But I can. You can stop them? The Gu Manor is a ducal house, Gu Yuan stated. My father is a general, my mother an S-ranked mental energy user. And I hold executive officer rank. Su Zhinshan will have to get past me first if he intends to take you. Su Wanning stared down at his large hands wrapped securely around hers. His palms dwarfing her small ones, not the gentle grasp of someone soothing a child, but a firm, sincere vow. Every word heavy with unshakable resolve. All right, she whispered. Gu Yuan's fingers tightened gently around hers. You agree. I agree. Su Wanning lifted her chin to meet his gaze. But you must promise me one thing. Speak it. Once the matching application is processed, they'll doubt my mental energy tier. If investigators come to test me, do not interfere. Let them run their scans. I've mastered full control of my energy to maintain a steady S+ reading. They will uncover nothing suspicious. She paused. But if the day comes when I need to unleash my true power, do not stand in my way. Gu Yuan's gaze settled on her. In the dim, murky glow of the energy stove, her eyes were pitch black and brilliant, like two pieces of obsidian rinsed clean with water. There was no trace of negotiation in her tone as she spoke. It was a plain statement of fact. Very well, Gu Yuan replied. Su Wanning tugged the corners of her mouth upward, slipped her hand free from his palm, and lifted a mug to take a sip of water. The liquid had gone cold, yet she drank it naturally, as if she had intended to drink chilled water all along. Are you leaving tomorrow morning? She asked. Noon, he answered. Then where will you sleep tonight? By the door. Gu Yuan stood and glanced at the ramshackle door cobbled together from a starship hatch, then turned his eyes back to Su Wanning. By the door, he said. Su Wanning shot him a glance, rose to her feet, and rummaged through the cabinet Lin Yi had built to pull out a blanket. The gray one he had brought with him that day. She held it out to him. It gets freezing outside. Gu Yuan took the blanket, his fingers brushing her fingertips. This time he did not close his hand around hers, nor did she flinch away. Carrying the blanket, he walked to the doorway, spread it out, and sat down. His back propped against the doorframe, facing the endless darkness beyond. Light spilled over his shoulders from the energy stove, casting a long shadow across the metal floor that stretched all the way to the edge of the cooking counter. Gu Yuan departed at noon on the third day. To be precise, it was the third day after the matching application was submitted. Not the 3 days Su Zhinshan was supposed to arrive. The 3 days Su Wanqing had spoken of had long passed. Yet Su Zhinshan never showed his face. Perhaps he had been held up by some urgent matter, or was waiting for word, or had never intended to come at all, sending Su Wanqing alone to scope out the territory. Su Wanning did not care. His absence was far preferable. If he came, she would only waste breath dealing with him. The matching application was approved the day after Gu Yuan left. Su Wanning's terminal pinged with an official notice from the Psychic Regulation Bureau. Its rigid wording indistinguishable from legal statute. After review, the matching application between Gu Yuan SSS grade psychic wavelength and Su Wanning S+ grade psychic wavelength complies with relevant regulations and is hereby approved. Effective immediately, the two parties shall enter a legal matching partnership, entitled to all rights and bound by all obligations stipulated under the Imperial Matching Code. After reading the notice, Su Wanning set her terminal aside. They were matched. She and Gu Yuan were officially matched partners. Su Wanning stood and walked over to her tomato trellises. She plucked the largest fruit, weighing it lightly in her palm. It was heavy, its skin so thin she could see the flesh quivering faintly beneath the sunlight. She took a bite. It was sweet. Juice dribbled down the corner of her mouth. She wiped it away with her sleeve and took another bite. On the morning the news of Gu Yuan's approved matching came through, Su Wanning woke exceptionally early. She stirred before dawn, curled up under her blanket, and caught the sound of movement by the stove. It was not Lin Yi. His footsteps were light as a cat's, while these footsteps carried more weight, scraping softly against the metal floor. It was Yu Wuhan. Su Wanning pulled on the pale gray loungewear Gu Yuan had left behind, tied her hair back loosely, and stepped out of the partitioned sleeping nook. By the stove, a pot of water boiled furiously, bubbling over the rim. "Why are you up so early today?" Su Wanning asked. The knife in Yu Wuhan's hand paused mid-chop, and he did not turn to face her. "I couldn't sleep." Su Wanning walked over to the counter, glancing at the radish slices he had cut, then at the boiling pot. "What are you making?" Soup, Yu Wuhin mumbled quietly. Radish soup. You said radish soup warms the stomach best when eaten in the morning. Su Wanning froze. She had tossed that comment off casually a week prior. The weather had turned bitterly cold that dawn, and after finishing a bowl of radish soup, she had told Lin Yi it was ideal for morning consumption. She had assumed Yu Wuhin, tucked away in the back nook, had not heard a word. You've seen the notice? He asked. Su Wanning tapped her fingertips lightly against the stove surface. You already know? Yu Wuhin turned around, his violet eyes fixed firmly on her. The whites of his eyes were bloodshot, not the redness of someone who had been crying, but the dull flush of exhaustion. Faint dark purple shadows pooled beneath his irises, proof he had not closed his eyes all night. His expression was unnervingly calm. Gu Yuan messaged me last midnight, Yu Wuhin said. Su Wanning departed her lips, ready to ask why Gu Yuan would send him such news. But the question died unspoken. She understood his motive. Gu Yuan was not gloating, nor merely informing him of the development. He was sending a clear message to Yu Wuhin. I have taken this step, something you hold in name only, yet cannot protect her with in reality. He was not drawing a line between them. He was stating plainly that Yu Wuhin's strength had yet to recover, and for now, only Gu Yuan was capable of shielding her. Had Yu Wuhin grasped the underlying meaning? Staring into his violet eyes, Su Wanning was certain he had. Are you angry? Su Wanning asked. What right do I have to be angry? His voice dropped so low it nearly vanished beneath the pot's constant bubbling. You and I both know how our match came to be. To the outside world, I am a worthless invalid, powerless to protect you. He fell silent, the soup spoon hovering motionless in the broth. Gu Yuan being matched to you is the best possible outcome. His status can shield you. Yu Wuhin's tone sank even softer. A quiet laugh escaped her. Are you jealous? Su Wanning stepped forward, took the spoon from his grasp, and stirred the simmering soup. Whether you are useless is not for your stepmother to decide, she told him. You were broken when you first arrived, but not anymore. An A-grade physical ability does not make you worthless. Once the poison is fully purged and you regain your SS-grade power, you will never be a nobody. Yu Wuhin stared at her. As for the matching bond, Su Wanning handed the spoon back to him. The circumstances of how we were paired do not matter. What matters is that you're here with me now. And I have grown fond of you. The names printed on that official matching document are yours and mine. Not your stepmother's and mine. She may have stamped the paperwork, but it is us who will live this life together. Yu Wuhin took the spoon, his fingers brushing hers for a split second where they lingered. Is that truly how you feel? He whispered. Ever since my downfall, every member of my clan and the Council of Elders has cast me aside. Even my own father abandoned me. You always say I have a handsome face, that I belong to you. Yet I cannot bring myself to believe any of it is real. Su Wanning met his gaze. Those violet eyes were streaked with bloodshot veins and shadowed by sleeplessness, yet they held no trace of resentment. It was not that he felt no pain, he simply refused to let her witness his suffering. I mean every word, Su Wanning said firmly. Yu Wuhin stared blankly for a moment. As for Gu Yuan's application for a matching bond, Su Wanning explained. He applied, and I agreed, because his reasoning holds truth. The Su household is coming for me, and neither you nor Lin Yi nor I alone can hold them off. Gu Yuan can. He carries the surname Gu, heir to a ducal house and a legion executive. His authority commands respect. Without a formal matching bond, he has no legitimate standing to stand beside me and fend off the Su clan. This partnership grants him the right to shield me. Yu Wuhin watched her for a long stretch of time. What of your feelings for him? He asked. Su Wanning fell silent for a moment, turning to gaze at the orange glow of the energy stove flickering across her face in alternating light and shadow. Affection grows slowly, like seeds planted in a vegetable patch. You bury them in soil, water them, feed them nutrients, let them soak up sunlight, and they take root and bloom little by little. Do I hold affection for him? Yes. Not simply because I chose to accept his match, but because he came here, acted to protect me, and stood unwaveringly at my side. I cannot help but notice him. She twisted back to face Yu Wuhin. The same goes for you. Yu Wuhin's grip tightened slightly around the spoon's wooden handle. The same for me? His voice wavered faintly. I was drawn to you at first by your looks, but all the time we have spent together has shown me you are someone I could spend my entire life beside. I was abandoned as an infant, so I crave a family more than anything. And you're my family, Su Wanning said, locking eyes with him. Yu Wuhin's lips parted, then closed again without a word. He fished a candy from his pocket, unwrapped it, and popped it into his mouth. It tasted sweet. Then he pulled a second candy from another pocket and held it out to Suwanning. "Have one too," he said, his voice rough. Suwanning took the candy, unwrapped the wrapper, and placed it on her tongue. Sweetness spread across her palate. The two stood side by side beside the stove, candies tucked in their cheeks, neither speaking a word. White steam billowed from the pot, blurring their faces so their expressions could not be seen, but the soft upward curve of both their mouths was unmistakable. The hut door creaked open. Lin-Yi stepped inside carrying a woven basket brimming with leafy greens freshly plucked from the garden. Dew dotted his clothes and his brown hair hung damp, soaked through by morning mist. He spotted the pair by the stove, Suwanning and Yi Woohin standing shoulder to shoulder, bulging cheeks stuffed with candy, a pot of radish soup steaming between them. His footsteps faltered. "The matching application went through?" he asked. Suwanning and Yi Woohin both turned to look at him. "You already saw it?" Suwanning asked. Lin-Yi set the basket down on the counter and walked to the water basin to wash his hands. He scrubbed each finger slowly and thoroughly, dried them off, then turned to face Suwanning. "I caught sight of your terminal glowing early this morning," he explained. Glanced at the notification briefly. Suwanning remembered she had left her terminal on the stove the night before. Rather than bringing it into the sleeping nook, Lin-Yi must have seen the notice when he rose at dawn. "Aren't you going to ask anything?" Suwanning said. Lin-Yi walked over, picked up the soup spoon, and took a small sip to taste the broth. "The seasoning is perfectly balanced," he commented, setting the spoon back down. "The radish slices are unevenly cut, the larger chunks are undercooked and hard, while the smaller ones have dissolved completely into the broth. Try slicing them uniformly next time." Yi Woohin shot him a look.